today we will start with any other business for the LDCF, SCCF, to then move forward to the GBFF Council meeting, hoping to discuss today 3 agenda items for that council. Of course, the opening of the meeting, adoption of the agenda, then we will move forward to the work program and conclude the day with resource mobilization strategy. So with that said, I will now hand it over to the co-chair. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Naomi, and welcome everyone back to the 39th LDCF and SCCF meeting. We left off yesterday completing agenda item 5, and we'll now start with agenda item 6, which is any other business. At this point, I'd like to hand the floor to Anna V from the IEO to address the Council on the overview of IEO's ongoing evaluation activities. Over to you, Anna.
So Richard, unfortunately, okay, Anna, your computer's fixed. Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you, Gita. Thank you, Richard. Hello, everyone. The IEO has 2 evaluations underway. First, the annual evaluation report coming to you in June 2026. It will present a synthesis of evaluative evidence of the funds addressing nature-based solutions, socioeconomic co-benefits, and GEF programs in Pacific SIDS from evaluations of GEF-funded interventions that included LDCF, SSCF projects. Furthermore, the AER will present the management action record on progress on implementation of IEO recommendations. In June, we will also submit the fiscal year 27 work plan and budget for your consideration. Second, a comprehensive evaluation of the funds for presentation in December 2026. This will focus on the fund's performance and impact, response to COP guidance, policy conference, coherence, transformational change, efficiency, sustainability of results, and the fund's comparative advantage relative to other funds. It would include an assessment of the Challenge Program for Adaptation under the LDCF SSCF, focused on private sector engagement. OPS 8, presented earlier this week on Tuesday, included data from the AERs from 2023 to 2025 and the evaluation of climate information and early warning systems that we conducted and presented earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for that those remarks. I assume we don't open up for questions. Is that correct? Naomi? Okay. So we'll move on to the next item of any other business. So at this point, I'd like to open the floor for announcements from donors on new pledges. And I think we have Germany who wants to kick it off. Over to you, I think, Nicholas. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you very much, Richard. Germany is the largest contributor to the LDCF and SCCF, and we want to make it very clear. We stand with the least developed and most vulnerable countries. They have contributed the least to this intensifying climate crisis, but they are suffering the most under it. We heard their calls at COP30. Adaptation has to be a key mission for us all. Of course, we have to neutralize greenhouse gases by finally transitioning away from fossil fuels. That's what the world decided in Dubai. But some effects of global warming are already here. And that's why Germany supports adaptation finance and the new goal decided in Belém. That's why we support the Adaptation Fund and the ARISE program of the Climate Investment Funds. And that's why Germany is proud to announce that we're contributing an additional 10 million euros to the Least Developed Countries Fund. But we can't do it alone. Solidarity has to come from all corners of the world. We're calling on all traditional donors and especially emerging economies from the global south to help the most vulnerable countries in their struggle with climate change. It matters what you can contribute in today's world, regardless of where your country stood in 1992. Let's make the LDCF and SCCF a key part of the global effort for climate adaptation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Nicholas, and that's fantastic to hear that news. I'll now like to hand over to Corentin from Belgium for your remarks.
Thank you, Richard. I hope you can hear me fine.
Yes, Corentin, we hear you well.
Yes.
Fantastic. Dear colleagues, to conclude the fruitful discussions of yesterday, highlighting the relevance, the performance, and the areas of improvement of the LDC fund, I would like to share some good news as well. As everyone is aware, budgetary constraints are posing significant challenges to all donors. And this means that for many of us, including Belgium, we have to make strategic choices and sometimes question the ways in which we support our partners. Against this backdrop, Belgium is proud to reaffirm its long-standing support to the LDC fund, and we are pleased to pledge an additional 5.9 million euros to be provided before the end of this year, so still in 2025. This new contributions comes in addition to our previous contribution of 12.5 million euros already provided in February 2025. And this brings our total contribution to the LDCF to the amount of 18.5 million euros for the year 2025. As you see, Belgium remains fully committed to the Least Developed Countries Fund, as we've been in the past. So cumulatively, over the years, Belgium is indeed the second biggest donor to the LDC fund. In the current global context, it is critical to ensure that the LDC fund can continue its work in supporting the most vulnerable countries. And this is why we urge once again all countries in a position to do so, specifically the non-traditional donors, to contribute to the LDC fund, as requested by numerous COP decisions of the UNFCCC and Paris agreements. We indeed believe it is really critical to broaden the donor base for this kind of fund. Thank you very much for your attention. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Corentin. And again, that's tremendous news, and appreciate the generosity of Belgium. I'll now hand over to Orla from Ireland. Over to you, Orla.
Many thanks, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to all. So given the swift proceedings yesterday, I'll also be swift in my intervention. Ireland's support to the LDCF and SCCF is driven by our priority of supporting least developed countries and small island developing states in accessing climate finance. We would like to congratulate the two funds and the implementing entities on the work that's been carried out. And we're delighted to see a few countries that have accessing the fund for the first time. And we also look forward to seeing all countries who have not yet done so to draw down their allocations on the coming years. I'm very pleased to announce that Ireland will be contributing a further 3 million euros to the LDCF and 2 million euros to the SCCF for 2026. And as other colleagues have done, recognising the substantial funding gap and the necessity of deferring some projects, we would also call and all others in a position to do so to also contribute to the LDCF and SCCF. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Orla, and very much appreciate the contribution of Ireland. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Anders from Sweden.
Thank you. First, to say that we shared interventions by Germany, Belgium, and Ireland on the need for other countries in a position to do so to contribute. Sweden is pleased to formally announce our support to the least developed country fund with a contribution of 130 million Swedish kronor for this year. 130 million Swedish kronor. Sweden has been a consistent contributor to the LDCF since the inception of the fund in 2002. At the same time, Sweden takes note of the requests made at COP30 and repeated during our meeting yesterday for LDCF funding to reach 3 billion. In that context, we wish to underline that multilateralism entails obligations on all parties to ensure results in implementing the Paris Agreement, as well as an effective governance of our collective climate funds. It is not a one-sided obligation to provide increased finance and access. We also need to see results on the ground and ambitious low-emission development pathways addressing both mitigations and adaptations. Thank you.
Thank you, Anders, and appreciate that. It's fantastic to hear. I don't see any other requests from the floor. So thank you very much for, in particular, Belgium, Ireland, Sweden, and Germany for your contributions, and they are gratefully appreciated and most importantly, needed and will make a substantive impact. I think that concludes any other business. Oh, sorry. I see one other hand. Evans, over to you. Is that Evans? Are you calling for the floor?
Yes, please, Richard. I don't know if you can see me.
Yes.
Yes, can you see me? Oh, hear me as
yes, we can see the car.
Okay, great, thanks. No, I hope you have a very good morning there in DC. No, it's virtual. So wherever you are, and the colleagues, the Secretariat, thanks very much. I would want to congratulate fully and appreciate, I think, the good gesture presented just now by our colleagues, our partners from Germany, Belgium, and Ireland. There's also Sweden for these announcements on their contributions to the LDCF. I've noted there are also some of them contributing to the SCCF. This is very welcome from your partners, and please take it from the chair of the ODC is that this is fully appreciated. I know we can do more, but this is very good. As you heard even yesterday, we have some technically cleared concepts sitting in the ODCF, but waiting for resources to be approved for implementation. So this is very good. Welcome presentation from you, and I'm very thankful on behalf of the group to this gesture. Have a fruitful day and enjoy your day wherever you are. Thank you, Richard, Co-Chair. Thank you.
And thank you for those remarks, Evans. I don't see any other requests for the floor, so we'll close that item, and I think at this point that will mean we formally close the 39th meeting of the LDCF SCCF. Thank you, everyone. And we'll move on to the 5th GBFF Council meeting. So at this point, I'd like to welcome you all to the GBFF meeting. And as the first point, I would like to hand over to Claude, who will make some opening remarks. Over to you, Claude.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Dear Council members, members of the auxiliary body and advisory group, and observers, it's great to see you all online, connecting from all corners of the world. I would also like to extend a special welcome to Mrs. Astrid Showmaker, Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, who is joining us and will address Council in a few minutes. I want to remind you that the work done under the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund shows that the world believes that this fund will move us all towards the vision of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which is a future of life in harmony with nature. The work that we have done at the GBFF to support the Kunming-Montreal Framework demonstrates clearly how the GEF partnership and its family of funds is a state-of-the-art instrument for achieving the 2050 vision of the Convention of Biological Diversity. In 2024, the GBFF delivered in record time, from operationalization to finalization of a first programming tranche to dynamic projects. This set the tone globally for a bold and ambitious approach to financing biodiversity. 2025, the year we are closing out now, is the year the GBFF has matured. Let me spell it out with 3 points. First, we opened the second programming tranche in August. With the latest selection round that just concluded, the GBFF has now achieved all 3 of its portfolio targets. These were created to make sure that the fund supported the neediest countries, provided innovative financing, and supported Indigenous peoples and local communities. With the results of the last selection round and the work program you will review, you will see the share of projects for LDCs and SIDS is now at 43%, well above the 39% target. The share that is programmed through international financial institutions will be at 28%, above the 25% target. And 29% of all GBFF financing to date will support actions by Indigenous peoples and local communities, exceeding the aspirational target of 20%. Second, the fund's building blocks are ready for us to move into place. As requested by the June 2025 Council meeting, guidelines to better track GBFF funding supporting actions by Indigenous peoples and local communities have been developed. Starting today, with your discussion and input, we will set down on the path towards a resource mobilization strategy for the GBFF. Tomorrow, we will discuss an enhanced results framework to better measure the fund's contribution to the global goals and targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And third, our discussions will show that the GBFF is delivering across the globe. 288.7 million has now been programmed under the GBFF for 62 projects benefiting 71 countries. This list of countries encompasses 43 SIDS and LDCs. 21 LDCs and SIDS are successfully accessing the GBFF for the first time in the 4th round that was just completed. In short, the world asked for a dynamic fund, and the GEF has delivered. Let me briefly touch on the issues under discussion today and tomorrow. You are asked to approve a work program worth 28.2 million, featuring projects in Colombia, Indonesia, and Madagascar that advance biodiversity conservation on land and sea in some of the most biodiverse places on Earth. All projects have a strong focus on the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities, including Afro-descendant communities in Colombia. They are all also aim to develop tailored financial mechanisms to ensure long-term funding for biodiversity. You will also look at a pathway towards a resource mobilization strategy that will ultimately define our collective ambition for the GBFF's contribution to Target 19 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. You will discuss how to ensure more predictable funding from sovereign contributors, including how to broaden the donor base. You will also address new tools and approaches to mobilize resources from non-traditional donors, including the private sector and philanthropies. This conversation is timely and important as it comes before COP17, which will review collective progress on the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Because the COP will further discuss the criteria for the institutional structure to operate the CBD financial mechanism and recommend elements to further enhance global biodiversity finance, our discussions here show that the GEF is already thinking ahead. And as I mentioned previously, you will review a new results framework for the GBFF to improve the ability to monitor and report on the fund's contribution to the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework targets. It will do this by better aligning GBFF portfolio level results indicators with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Monitoring Framework adopted by the 16th Conference of the Parties to the Convention of Biological Diversity in February of this year. Let me now say that I'm very pleased to note the expansion of the advisory group and the inclusion of non-contributing members. I have heard that initial discussions have already been very productive. I'd like to sincerely thank all council members who contributed to the nomination process, and I look forward to their valuable engagement in the work ahead. I want to congratulate you and the other members of the GBFF community, those who serve on the advisory and auxiliary bodies, the observers from civil society, women, youth, the private sector, and of course, representatives of Indigenous peoples and local communities for your work with the GBFF team to ensure that all our work is based on consultation and open discussion. The extensive consultation and engagement since June council meetings underscores the ways that the business model for the GBFF is innovative, dynamic, and fit for purpose. Even as we are about to start our discussions here, I want us to already think ahead to next year. 2026 is a crucial year for biodiversity and for the GBFF. The road to COP17 in Armenia takes us through the meetings of the CBD subsidiary body for implementation in Rome and Nairobi. At these meetings, the work of the GEF partnership, the work that the GEF partnership has done will do and will be very strongly scrutinized. We are all well positioned to show that the GEF is fit for purpose. I look at all we have accomplished with the GBFF. I compare it with other biodiversity financing mechanisms that support the convention, and I'm very pleased with what I see. The work of the GBFF has surged ahead faster than anyone else, whether this is in resource mobilization, project deployment, or engagement with stakeholders. The GBFF is showing results around the globe and across society that demonstrate leadership. They reveal that GBFF is a great complement to other funds, the Kunming Biodiversity Fund and the Cali Fund. But above all else, the results that we see today prove the first-in-class effectiveness, responsiveness, and innovation of the GEF. Thanks in advance to Mr. Co-Chair and to all of you for your engagement over the next days. Let's make history today and work hard as we head to COP17. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Claude, for those remarks. I'd also like to thank the Secretariat for your work in preparing for this session. The OECD tells us that biodiversity-related development finance targeting biodiversity is growing from $10.9 billion in 2015 to $25.8 billion in 2022 and $29.8 billion in 2023. These are all very positive numbers. But we know there is much more work to do, and of course the GBFF is only one fund, along with the GEF Trust Fund, contributing to the goals of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And we know that funding from all sources will be needed to meet these important goals. I'd like to acknowledge the work program that will be presented today amounts to over $28 million, covering 3 projects in Colombia, Indonesia, and Madagascar. Beyond the work program, I'm pleased to note that much progress has been made since the June GBFF Council meeting. For example, the GBFF is moving quickly on supporting countries on a competitive basis. The GBFF opened a second tranche in August 2025, and the first selection round from this new tranche, which is the 4th overall round, has concluded with the selection of 22 new project preparation grants in 34 countries, worth over 87 million. I'm delighted to note that 21 LDCs and SIDS are accessing the GBFF for the first time with this round. The fund has already opened its 5th selection round, which closed yesterday on December the 17th. I'm looking forward to learning about the level of interest from countries in the 5th selection round. In addition, I'm pleased to see significant progress has been made in achieving all portfolio level targets. With the approvals announced in November 25, we against the 36 plus 3% allocated to SIDS and LDCs, the 43.2 allocated. Against the 25% target going through international financial institutions, 28% has been programmed through IFIs. And the aspirational share of 20% by 2030 to support actions by Indigenous peoples and local communities across the portfolio to date has achieved 28.6. These are all significant and positive indicators of progress. While these figures will continue to evolve with new approvals, it's reassuring to see that the portfolio has been developing in line with key targets agreed by Council in June 2023. And I wish to recognise with appreciation the efforts of countries and agencies in working towards these goals. Furthermore, Council in June 2025 requested the Secretariat to develop 2 concrete products, a proposal to enhance the GBFF results framework and guidelines to track and report the GBFF resources to support actions by Indigenous peoples and local communities following a consultation process. Both of these have been delivered to Council. I'm also looking forward to learning more about the engagement of the advisory group, the auxiliary group, and the observers to the GBF Council. These are all important elements to the governance of the GBFF, and the more we can have this strengthened engagement, the stronger the overall results we will deliver from the GBFF. These are also unique features of the governance of the GBFF, with robust stakeholder engagement to help the Council's decision making. We'll also discuss an important subject on resource mobilisation. I hope the discussion will be a rich one, and no pun intended, to enable us to make progress for this fund to be supported by all sources with innovative ideas and perspectives. Colleagues, the GBFF is demonstrating agility, responsiveness, and also different ways of doing business within the family of funds. And the GBF is making steady progress to help countries achieve the goals of the KM-GBFF. But the discussions today and looking forward really need to focus on how we can make the GBFF better and deliver more effective results on the ground to support Indigenous peoples, the communities, and impact on people, and the environment, which is ultimately the purpose of this fund. I'm looking forward to the discussion today and tomorrow and welcome your engagement. Thank you very much. On that, I would like to remind the Council that a provisional agenda has been circulated for consideration as document GEF/GBFF.0501. At this point, I'd like to open up to Council if there's any comments and/or items to be added under other business. Naomi, I'll hand over to you to manage the request for the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. I see that Gita is now raising her hand. Gita, floor is yours.
Thank you, Naomi and Co-Chair. The IEO would like to make a brief statement on an update on evaluation work on the GBFF being undertaken. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gita. This is well noted. And I don't see anyone else requesting the floor, Mr. Co-Chair. So back to you.
Thank you very much, Naomi, and the request, Gita, is noted. I'd like to now invite Council to adopt the agenda for the meeting. I don't see any requests for the floor. The agenda is so adopted. Thank you. On that, we'll now move on to agenda item 2, which is the work program for the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. For this, I'd like to invite Benjamin Singer.
Richard, I'm sorry. I think we have Astrid Showmaker from the CBD to make remarks.
Sorry. Thank you, Claude. Over to you, Astrid.
Thank you so much, Richard and Claude, and it's really a pleasure to be with all of you. And I have to say these remarks can be actually quite short because most of the points that I wanted to make have been made respectively by Claude and Richard. So I'll try and summarize a bit. And first of all, really thank you very much for this idea of letting this meeting make history. I think that from our perspective in the Convention Secretariat would of course be the best thing that can happen. Thank you also for putting this discussion in the context of COP17 and the global review and the next step we need to take with regard to the finance mechanism of our convention. So you've covered these aspects and I won't go into them. But I want to make 3 points, talking about the success of the fund, about complementarity between funds, and then also about the overall allocations to biodiversity that we're seeing. So if I start with the success of the fund, I think you've already eloquently said that this is quite a remarkable bit of work that GEF is doing, of course, with the with the commitment and engagement of the Secretariat and the support of all of you as members of the Council. The speed with which the fund was set up, we've been talking many times, was impressive. But I think also in terms of its delivery, and we've heard about the targets and how they have been exceeded, is likewise impressive. And we welcome certainly the forthcoming enhanced results framework, and also, and in particular, the alignment of indicators with the KMGBF, which we now have. And I think in the spirit of simplification and clarity, the closer these indicators are, if they're identical, the better it is for our work and the greater clarity we have about the contributions of the fund. So this is really important. If I say it's a success story, nothing is perfect. Of course, we in the Secretariat also hear from recipient countries from time to time some concerns. So there are issues which we also see can still be improved. So for example, we have heard that countries do not always get feedback on the project proposals and then make repeated submissions without really having understood why the first time they didn't succeed. So that's maybe not the best way forward. And sometimes there are also questions, why does one project get approval and not the other? So greater clarity in that, I think, would be welcomed by recipient countries and would also contribute to the understanding of the fund and the appreciation of the fund. But having seen how receptive the GEF Secretariat has been to any suggestions from Council members, from partner countries, I'm very confident that this can be addressed. Now, the second point I wanted to make is that for the Global Biodiversity Framework, the GBFF is a very, very important instrument. At the same time, we have seen in the area of biodiversity, as everywhere else, the tendency to create new funds. As somebody who likes to bake, I can attest to the fact that if you cut a pie into smaller pieces, it doesn't become a bigger pie, but you do lose a lot of crumbs. So from our perspective, this is a worrying tendency that we would like to sort of counter if we can. And of course, the best way of sort of, saying that there is no need for new funds is to demonstrate that existing funds are well financed, well replenished, and deliver. And I think on the delivery part, we've already spoken, the replenishment we will now see, and that is obviously important. At the same time, and you have mentioned it, amongst the new and additional funds that have been created in the area of biodiversity, I do want to mention the Cali Fund. That was a big breakthrough at COP16 last year in Cali. This is a fund, as you may know, primarily for business contributions, so for businesses that use digital sequencing information based on genetic resources. The fund is very, very new, has been operationalized also very quickly, but is now waiting to receive meaningful contributions. But I think in terms of the work that you're doing in this meeting, it is very important to look at what the parties of the convention wanted when they put the Cali Fund in mind, in particular as regards the resource allocation, which is one of the big innovations, moving away from project-based allocations to a formula that supports parties' determined priorities, and of course, to a spending target for indigenous peoples and local communities in the order of 50%. So these, I think, are important signals from the parties to our convention that going forward, the GBFF should not basically ignore, and it's very good to hear that the IPLC allocations of GBFF have exceeded the target. But again, so this is something to be borne in mind as we go forward. Likewise, there has been important complementarity between the GEF and the Green Climate Fund over the past years, and I think you've discussed that also in previous days of that meeting. So the GCF has made has provided very important support on terrestrial and marine areas conservation or restoration. That is substantial. And as we discuss the success of the various funds, it is really important that we have precise and aggregated information to help inform parties and stakeholders in their assessment of how their needs have been addressed and can be met. So in summary, I believe it's important that we, in our debate, focus on exploring complementarity among established funds, and maybe sort of instituting some kind of complementarity and supplementary test when considering any new funds. In other words, asking ourselves, do we need new funds, or can the existing funds cover what is needed? And the last point I wanted to make on overall allocations, we have heard about the finance gap for biodiversity that was meant to be 700 billion in 2022. We've also heard already about the positive tendencies in biodiversity spending, which we really, really appreciate. At the same time, unfortunately, also the biodiversity negative spending, so the harmful subsidies, have been increasing, and as we understand it, at a rate even faster than positive spending. So the finance gap is still there, is still substantial and potentially increasing. So that means for us that also in the work of the GEF, we need to focus on this target 18, on the elimination or repurposing of harmful subsidies, but also we need to make sure that allocations for biodiversity funding are not going down. And for this, I just want to close on a small note of caution. I think you all know the GBFF is meant to be complementary to the GEF. The GEF is a very, very important mechanism for our convention. It is our current financing mechanism. The GEF also has an amazing, let's say, competitive advantage in terms of leveraging solutions that are not just valuable for biodiversity, but also address other issues of the triple planetary crisis, climate change, land degradation, chemical waste, etc. So the GEF is a fund that can support synergistic implementation. And by lowering allocations for biodiversity in the GEF, of course, also these synergies are being put in question. So that, in our understanding, must not happen. And let me just repeat, therefore, that the GBFF is meant to be complementary. And we hope that the fact that the GBFF exists is not a factor in potentially lowering allocations under the GEF for biodiversity. So with all of that, let me thank again the GEF Secretariat for its enormous responsiveness, flexibility, and hard work in making the GBFF work and making it a beacon in the biodiversity landscape, and to all of you for considering its generous replenishment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those opening remarks, Astrid, and please accept my apologies for the oversight in not introducing you earlier. My apologies. So thank you very much. We'll now go back to agenda item 2, and I'd like to invite Benjamin Singer and Chizuru Aoki from the GEF Secretariat to introduce document GEF/GBFF 05/02, the work program for the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. Over to you, Ben and Chiz.
Thank you so much, Mr. Co-Chair. Good morning from the GEF Secretariat. And I hope everyone can hear me okay. It's our pleasure to present to you the GBFF work program to the 5th GBFF Council. This is the third work program to be presented to Council following the very first work program that was presented in June 2024, and the second one that was presented 6 months ago in June 2025. So you can see there's quite a bit of rapid progress in programming. Next slide, please. Okay, the work program includes 3 fully developed projects from Colombia, Indonesia, and Madagascar. And these projects were selected as part of the first programming tranche, which opened in February 2024. And I'll say a little bit more about that later in the presentation. These 3 projects are requesting $25,917,000 of project financing from the GBFF. And they are mobilizing co-financing of $57.07 million, which are not required, but encouraged strongly. 23.5% of the financing is to go to support actions by IPLCs. At the portfolio level, including these 3 projects, the 20% aspirational target to support actions by IPLCs continues to be surpassed from the first to 4th selection rounds results also combined. Now, I'm going to request my colleague Benjamin Singer to walk you through the projects.
Hello, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to address the GBFF Council once again and to present this very nice bouquet of 3 projects over $5 million. Let's start with the largest one. This is a project that focuses on Colombia and in particular the Pacific region known as El Choco, and which was submitted by the International Financial Institution, CAF. It aims to support Afro-Colombian communities, not only in conserving mangroves, but in developing biodiversity friendly livelihoods. Now, the Choco region of Colombia is extremely rich in mangroves. It contains close to 3/4 of the mangroves of the entire country. But as we've seen across the country, especially since the peace accords, the deforestation has shot up by 40%. And these areas also happen to be the poorest in the country, bearing in mind that these Afro-Colombian populations are descendants of slaves that were brought in by the Spanish for mining in the region. Many of these ran away and set up these traditional communities known as palenques. Now, this project focuses on supporting the communities in conserving these threatened mangroves, but also to support traditional livelihoods. And I'm going to focus here on one particular type of livelihood, which is known as piangua harvesting. Piangua are cockle shells, which have historically been collected by women and prepared in a famous dish known as, I think it's encocado de piangua. Thank you. I'm looking at Noemi, my colleague Noemi to my left. I looked it up and it looks actually worth visiting Colombia alone for. But obviously this piangua, the entire value chain is dominated by women. So supporting these livelihoods is also has a very strong gender focus. Additional outputs include impact investment financing schemes that will be designed and piloted as part of project implementation. In terms of global environmental benefits, we're looking at close to 700,000 hectares of both protected and non-protected mangroves, and close to 1 million hectares of marine habitat, again, both protected and non-protected, that will be under improved management. And of the 3 projects, this is the one that also stands to provide the strongest co-benefit in terms of climate change mitigation, with close to 7 million tons of carbon equivalent. Moving on to the next project. This one focuses on Indonesia, and in particular on wildlife-based ecotourism, again with a strong focus both on conservation but also on livelihoods. Wildlife-based tourism represents over 1/3 of Indonesia's tourism income, which, as we know, is significant. But even in protected areas and in the 5 national parks which are included in this proposal, major threats continue, including deforestation, hunting, and overfishing. Now, as I just mentioned, this project looks at 5 exceptionally biodiverse national parks. For those who are familiar with Indonesia, we're looking at Waikambas in southern Sumatra, in East Java, Baluran and Alas Purwo national parks. Tanjung Puting, for those amateur primatologists among you, will ring a bell because it also has an orangutan rehabilitation center. And for the divers among you, at the heart of the Coral Triangle is the Wakatobi National Park, which is absolutely exceptional when it comes to coral biodiversity. Also, focusing on Wakatobi as an example, this is also the one of the homelands of the Bajau indigenous people. These are, again, if you are a scuba diver and you know that area, you might have seen these people come out from nowhere, from the sea, trying to sell you a fish or two. These are the Bajau people. They are sea-based and have historically been marginalized both politically and economically. And the interesting IPLC dimension of this project is that they, just for taking Wakatobi as an example, they will be included in FPIC, they will be included in marine zoning, ecotourism, storytelling, and of course, benefit sharing. As this example in Wakatobi shows, the project will not only focus on the conservation of these national parks, but also support community-led livelihoods that are based on ecotourism, with the aim of reinvesting over half of the proceeds back into the conservation of these national parks. Overall, we're looking at over 600,000 hectares of terrestrial and 1.3 million hectares of marine protected areas that will be under improved management, with the aim of supporting 6,000 beneficiaries in and around these national parks. And that is a UNDP project. Last project, which is in this work program, is a WWF project looking at Madagascar. And again, we have a marine dimension here. In fact, this proposal is primarily focused on marine ecosystems and centers on this concept known as LMMAs, locally managed marine areas. This is a concept that has been inspired by community-governed marine areas pioneered in the Pacific, notably in Fiji, the Cook Islands, and Samoa, and is now being applied to Madagascar and other areas. Bearing in mind that Madagascar is one of the unsung hotspots of marine biodiversity. It's home to over 300 coral species. That's the highest in the western half of the Indian Ocean. And the sea sustains 10 million people on the Red Island, including 250,000 artisanal fishers. Now, the project focuses on formally recognizing these LMMAs, strengthening conservation trust funds, and mobilizing the private sector to support community livelihoods. There are two conservation trust funds which are included in this proposal. One is known as TANMEV, and the second one is FAPBM, the Foundation for Protected Areas and Biodiversity of Madagascar. This is an endowment fund which has been around for over 20 years, which has received financing from multiple European donors and is Africa's leading conservation trust fund. It has an endowment of $157 million, the capital gains of which are invested into nature conservation. And so this project has this double aim of supporting these conservation trust funds, so further strengthening an innovative financial mechanism, but also supporting both the private sector and community livelihoods in 3 LMMAs, which are spread across the western coast of Madagascar, the Diana LMMA in the north, Manambul Tsiribin in the center, and Mafal in the south. Next slide, please. Overall, this work program will be contributing to 13 of the 23 targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. It will be contributing to multiple GEF core indicators and global environmental benefits, total of 827,000 hectares of terrestrial and almost 2.5 million hectares of marine protected areas under improved management. Close to 500,000 hectares of landscapes will undergo improved practices thanks to these 3 projects alone, and over 500,000 hectares of marine habitat will be under improved practices to benefit biodiversity. Thanks to the first of the 3 projects, the CAF Colombia one, 200 tons of fisheries will be moved to more sustainable levels. Close to 7 million tons of carbon equivalent will be mitigated, and the 3 projects together will be supporting over 15,000 direct beneficiaries, 47% of which are women. Next slide, please. So of these, I'm looking at similar figures here, except that this slide focuses not on just the work program, but the 18 fully developed projects that have been approved to date. So that includes the 4 projects of the first work program, the 3 projects of the June 2025 Council meeting work program, and the 3 that are on the table today. So that brings us to 10, of which plus 8 projects that have been fully approved that are under $5 million. And as you can see, the total for the fully approved and fully developed projects contribute to 13.4 million hectares of terrestrial protected areas created or under approved management, 30 million hectares of marine protected areas, close to 16,000 hectares under restoration, 11.3 million hectares of landscapes under improved management to benefit biodiversity, over 100 million tons of carbon equivalent, and number of beneficiaries stands now at over 360,000 people, just over half of which are women. In terms of the key risk analysis for this work program in particular, so again, coming back to the 3 projects, we're looking at a moderate risk for all 3 categories: context, innovation, and execution. Bearing in mind that innovation and execution are slightly over moderate, but we're still within the let's say the moderate bracket of under 2.5. And this is where I hand back to my colleague Chizuru Aoki. Cheers, back to you.
Let's go to the next slide. So the 3 projects that we have in front of you in this work program, they come from the 2nd and 3rd selection rounds of the first tranche. Just as a reminder, projects above $5 million are to be included in a work program to be presented to council, while those under $5 million are approved by the CEO under the delegated authority from council. So one of the projects in front of you, the Indonesia project, was selected as a part of the 2nd selection round of the first GBFF tranche, and you can see the overall PPG requests that were approved during the 2nd selection round in this particular slide. And you will also notice that there is significant progress that's been made to get them towards the full approval and endorsement as well as the implementation. Next slide, please. And the 2 other projects, the one from Colombia and Madagascar, were selected as part of the 3rd and final selection round of the first GBFF tranche, which closed on September 30th, 2024. As you can also see, there has been quite a bit of progress being made to get them to the endorsement stage. And the council should be expecting to see other initiatives from the 3rd selection round above $5 million in the future work programs. Next slide, please. I will not go into detail, but just to highlight that we did have a fourth selection round close, and these are the projects that were submitted as well as proposals accepted. And we'll spend more time tomorrow during the progress report discussions to go over in further detail how we're doing in terms of progress in the selection rounds as well as the targets. Next slide, please. Before we close, just a reminder, the work program cover note, which was posted on November 6th, indicated that the Secretariat expects to report on further progress in achieving the portfolio level targets with the second GBFF programming tranche and the fourth selection round focusing on citizen LDCs and internationally financial institutions. So accordingly, this is a snapshot of how we are doing right now. And we're pleased that the three targets, namely supporting action by IPLCs, programming for the citizen LDCs, as well as those through the international financing institutions, have been met or surpassed with the approvals announced with the four selection rounds. As indicated earlier, tomorrow we will present the progress report and we'll have an opportunity to discuss the progress on the portfolio as well as targets in further detail. So with that, thank you very much, and back to you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Benjamin and Chizuru, for those eloquent presentations. I'd now like to open the floor for questions and comments from Council, and I'll hand over to you, Naomi, to manage the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard, and with pleasure. So the floor is now open. As usual, please feel free to put your names in the chat, or I will also do my best to track the raised hands accordingly. So the floor is now open for comments and questions, Council. It seems that both Keith and Ben were very okay. Andrea, we'll start with Andrea, followed by Catherine from Canada. So Andrea, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Naomi, and thank you very much to the Secretariat for this paper, which we welcome, and the continued implementation of programming in line with the agreed programming directions and targets of the GBFF. Congratulations on meeting those three targets. That's fantastic news. We approve the work program as presented, covering the three projects in Colombia, Indonesia, and Madagascar. We especially welcome the marine habitat focus in this work program, and we note the project's contribution to wider GEF core indicators. We also welcome the support for IPLCs in this work program and the expansion of the LLMA concept from the Pacific to Madagascar. We look forward to seeing more projects approved in coming months, and we encourage further contributions to this important fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for breaking the ice. I'll now hand it over to Catherine, followed by Stagger. Catherine, floor is yours.
Ouais, merci. Je vais faire mon intervention en français. Donc, merci au secrétariat pour la préparation minutieuse de ce programme de travail et pour les efforts déployés pour coordonner avec les agences d'exécution et les pays partenaires. Ensemble, les trois projets reflètent un financement solide en faveur des peuples autochtones, font progresser l'égalité des genres et visent à répondre à 12 des 23 cibles du cadre mondial pour la biodiversité de Kunming-Montréal. Et en lisant les documents, on trouvait qu'il manquait un peu de détails concernant les 57 millions de dollars en cofinancement et nous aimerions obtenir davantage d'informations sur les types et sources de cofinancement, notamment la part du secteur privé. Benjamin, vous avez touché un peu sur le projet en Colombie avec les fonds fiduciaires pour la conservation, donc ça c'est bien. Je ne sais pas si vous avez d'autres informations sur les autres projets. Et puis, est-ce que le secrétariat pourrait aussi préciser comment il travaille avec les pays pour mobiliser des sources de financement supplémentaires pour les projets? Plus particulièrement, comment contribue-t-il à réduire la dépendance aux subventions du FEM tout en catalysant et mobilisant les ressources provenant des sources publiques, privées et d'autres mécanismes de financement innovants? Et pour nos commentaires techniques, nous allons les envoyer par écrit. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Catherine. I will now continue with Sagar, Wang, Eda, Nicholas, Regina, and then we will break to hear from the Secretariat. So with that said, Sagar, CSO Network, floor is yours.
Thank you, Noemi. Thank you to the Secretariat for preparing this. The GEF CSO Network welcomes the proposed GBFF work program and supports its approval. We welcome the strong focus on Indigenous people and local communities, including the allocation of resources to IPLT-related actions, which exceeds the fund's 20% aspirations and reaches nearly close to 30% in the current work program. This is an important signal and aligns with the intent of Global Biodiversity Framework. If the GBFF is to be truly transformative in line with KMGBF, including targets 22 and 23, its success should be measured not only by biodiversity outcomes, but also by how directly it shifts power, resources, and decision-making to Indigenous people and local communities on the ground. At this early stage, setting the right standards matter. Clearer reporting on how IPLC dedicated resources reach communities in practice, how governance roles are shared, and how learning is exchanged across GBFF project would strengthen impact and credibility. The CSO network looks forward to continued engagement to help ensure GBFF delivers inclusive, durable, and locally grounded biodiversity outcomes, and will also send a written comment later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sagar, and written comments, of course, always very welcome. I'll now give the floor to Eda, who is our GBFF observer representing women, followed by Nicholas and Regina. Eda, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Distinguished Council members, Madam Astrid Schumacher, GFC Secretariat and fellow observers, I am speaking on behalf of the CBD Women Caucus, representing women as observers in this council. I am here with my colleague Priyanka. Women's rights, as well as Indigenous people's rights and human rights, are being cut out of negotiations and commitments while multilateralism is trying to stay relevant. Spaces like this council make grounded inclusion, respect, and synergies possible, or they should do so. We bring here the voices of women and girls around the world, more than 90 countries, more than 800 individuals, more than 350 organizations. We also bring their expertise and experiences on what is really happening on the ground and what is urgently needed to be supported, modified, and/or changed. I would like to extend on behalf of our constituency our sincere appreciation to all council members who recognize that women are far more than a percentage indicator. Now this recognition of our roles has to be supported by, among other, full and effective representation and participation, capacity building, and direct access to funding. We respectfully insist projects designed by women on the ground will be more sustainable and will reach those facing the impacts of what we call the triple crisis: biodiversity loss, climate change, and persistent inequality. We are very pleased on how the GEF Secretariat is hands-on in improving the relevance of us as observers in this council, and we have been invited to engage in consultations for the resource mobilization strategy and the guidelines on actions by Indigenous peoples and local communities. The proposition here is key. BI is the magic word for inclusiveness and ensuring representation and participation of women in projects supported by the GBF Fund. In this upcoming year, a CBD COP year, and the midterm review of the Gender Plan of Action adopted by the CBD COP 15, as well as the GBF was adopted, the collective power of women and in all our diversity should be evident in the GBF Fund-supported projects. It is this power that lies in our knowledge, our leadership, and daily contribution that is very important to see here. It's not only, and I love the example of the pinagua harvesting and the cooking, but we can do so much more. This is linked to biodiversity conservation, to micro and small enterprises led by women, to speak to us in private sector terms. Was this project designed by women? That we don't know yet. Over 15,000 direct beneficiaries, 47% women, seems great, but from our point of view, it probably is disproportionately low regarding the surface covered by projects and the resource allocated. There is a need to better report about women's engagement. We stay attentive to the details that will be presented tomorrow. We look forward to continue working with all of you and the GEF Secretariat to ensure gender equality remains central to effectiveness, the impact, and the sustainability of projects supported by the GBF Fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eda. And Wang, deep apologies. Going back to the chat, I saw that you requested the floor before Eda. So if that's okay with Nicolas, who is next in line, I will now give you the floor, then followed by Nicolas and Regina. And apologies for the oversight. So Wang, I see that you are here joining us. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Naomi. Thank the Secretariat for preparing this report. We are supportive for this work program. The three projects are well aligned with the specific targets of the KMGBF, particularly in key areas such as the supporting the IPLC, mobilizing sustainable finance, and promoting the gender equality. This is clearly demonstrate that GBF resources are being directed toward globally agreed priorities. The projects incorporate innovative and catalytic financing mechanisms designed to unlock and leverage substantial additional resources. These approaches are critical for moving beyond the grant dependency and catalyzing the sustainable investment into biodiversity conservation. We have noted the execution risk associated with certain projects. It is expected that mitigation measures and corresponding monitoring indicators for this specific risk will be developed to address this risk. Thank you so much.
谢谢 Wang. And thank you, Nicolas. Patience, the floor is yours, followed by Regina, and then we will hear from the secretary. Nicolas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Naomi. Germany would also like to thank the Secretariat, the agencies, and the focal points for this GBFF work program, and particularly Benjamin and Chiz for their very engaging presentation of the projects. The many details were very much appreciated. It's another important step towards implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. We're happy with a strong IFI involvement, and we commend CAF for their ambitious project. It's also good to see another work program with a high resource share for IPLCs. We note that co-finance has moderately picked up again, but we would like to see some stronger efforts in this regard in future work programs. The same applies to the involvement of LDCs and SIDS, as well as the risk profile, which are not quite where we would like to see them. We understand, of course, that the overall picture is a bit different. This is only the work program, and we will talk about this when we talk about the progress report. But, in the work program with the biggest projects, we would also like to see some more LDC and SIDS involvement. We do still have some reservations about the project in Madagascar, as the project proposal is in part still unclear and unconvincing to us. Supporting long-term conservation and sustainable use of coastal and marine biodiversity is important, of course, but we do see a danger of possible overlaps with other projects. We will hand in detailed comments in writing, and we're looking forward to an improved project proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. Regina, floor is yours.
Gracias, Noemi. Thank you. We acknowledge the GBFF work program and its alignment with the GBFF target levels. Our constituency fully recognizes and appreciates the focus on SIDS and LDCs. In addition, we would be interested in receiving support and guidance on how countries such as Mexico and those in the Central American region can further strengthen the competitiveness of their project proposals to facilitate future approvals. Likewise, our constituency recommends that future work programs include a brief narrative highlighting how projects can offer replicable lessons and other countries in the region. Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias, Regina. Now let's break to give some minutes to Chis and Ben to respond to these very good comments. And then we will proceed back to the list of participants, starting with Luciana, Navan, Ramon, Franz, Joko, and Jonas. So I'll now hand it over to Chis.
Yeah, thank you so much for overall positive feedback as well as welcoming of the work program and our efforts so far made by countries and agencies and observers also very much appreciated. So Ben and I will try to provide concise responses to the questions posed in no order of them being made. So there was a request from Regina about the further strengthening proposals. So one of the things that we started to do with the fourth round is to provide opportunities to have conversations with the proponents so that we can give a little bit more detailed feedback on the proposals. So now that we have a full team on board, we are really moving in that direction so that some feedback as requested by countries as well as proponents can be provided, and we want to continue to do that. Also recognizing this is a competitive process in a sense that each and every selection round will have different cohorts of proposals coming in. So it's a little bit difficult for us to also make any definitive feedback as to how to ensure that any proposal will be selected, because the nature of the competitive process in its own right makes it a little bit difficult for us to say anything that would assure any of the proposals will make it into the selection round. And very well taken about the proposal to have some narratives on replicability as well as lessons learned. We will make sure that this is something that we will also communicate as the PPC requests are developed further into the projects to be submitted for council as well as the CEO endorsements to be done. And thank you, Nicholas, for and also somebody, I'm trying to figure it. I think it was maybe Catherine from Canada made comments on the co-financing. We do recognize it's optional, it's picking up, and I'm going to ask Ben to come in and explain further about the specific questions that came from Canada. Just to mention from my side, we are monitoring this and we are really keeping track of different kinds of co-financiers. And, for us, it's not just about money. It's more to do with how these stakeholders are actually part and parcel of the projects and program design, but also towards implementation and management. So we just want to make sure that this isn't just a number reporting exercise. We will do that, but we are actually trying to really make sure that these are good stakeholders as well as good part of the project design. And that also touches upon the comment made by Edda. We really appreciate all the time and efforts and goodwill that the observers have been coming to us, particularly in the past 6 months with all these tasks that the council had requested us and the observers to undertake. And we are very grateful for the good insights as well as good suggestions that have been made from the observers to make our work more meaningful and to have more of a substantive conversations that on documents that come for decisions to council. So thank you so much for that. And we really hope we can continue this collaboration as well as benefiting from the insights to be provided by the observers. Fully agree. There also needs to be efforts made overall of the inclusion of stakeholders, not just as beneficiaries, but they are the ones who would really need to be making to be central in the design, but also for the implementation as well as management of aspects of the initiative. So I do think we're making headways in that way, but there's respond to additional questions. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Chiz. So I'm probably going to focus on the more detailed comments that we received. Catherine, thank you very much for these. I'd say the two very interconnected and relevant comments, both on co-financing and what in project development jargon we call the exit strategy. In terms of co-financing, the first project, Biomanglar, CAF Colombia. The co-financing includes a $15 million loan from CAF, a contribution of over $1 million from WWF, and also $5.5 million from the Fund for Life and Biodiversity. So you see that there's quite a bit of both non-grant financing from CAF, but also private and philanthropic co-financing in this proposal. The co-financing ratio for Biomanglar is 1 to 2.27. For wildlife ecotourism in Indonesia, the ratio is 1 to 3.38. The entirety of the co-financing here comes from Departemen Kehutanan, the Ministry of Forests of Indonesia, in recurrent expenditures. As for Madagascar, the $3.3 million co-financing includes a grant again from WWF to the tune of close to $2 million. Now, I would consider it important to when you're looking at co-financing, and Chiz, and both Chiz and Nicolas, I think, mentioned it, are absolutely correct. The co-financing ratio has been increasing since the first selection round. It is not compulsory, however, it's strongly encouraged, and the competitive nature of the GBFF means that generally those that have a higher co-financing ratio also mean that they have higher impact in terms of contribution to global environmental benefits, and therefore they tend to be selected. So the selective process means that the co-financing ratio can be considerably higher than the requirements. But when we're looking at co-financing, it's also important to take into account what we call leveraged financing. And leveraged financing, co-financing is money that's put into the implementation of project. Leveraged financing is what we would consider money coming out of the project itself. So creations of new livelihoods, of innovative financing mechanisms. And the leveraged financing is crucial for what we call the exit strategy. So the long-term sustainability of the project, of its impacts, even after GBFF financing runs out. And so the exit strategy is really something that we project reviewers at the GBFF and the GBFF team tend to focus on strengthening, because we are very aware of the limited financing that the GBFF has at hand. And so it's important to maximize the impact of GBFF projects, to build in mechanisms that include leveraged financing. And in all three projects, we do see strengthening of livelihoods, and that includes strengthening of financial resources that will be reinvested into the conservation and sustainable management and the restoration of the biodiversity that is at stake in all three projects. And I think I mentioned a few examples here, but strengthening, for example, the conservation trust funds in Madagascar, ensuring that over 50% of the proceeds from ecotourism are reinvested into the 5 national parks in Indonesia are just examples of this. Sagar, you're very you're totally right in pointing out that we need the GBFF. We need to measure success not only by biodiversity outcomes alone, but also elements that speak to the putting IPLCs into the driver's seat in particular. My colleagues will be talking about this in the in the GBFF results framework, which I believe will be presented tomorrow. Eda, you pointed out also correctly that 15,000 beneficiaries doesn't sound like a huge amount, especially relative to the number of hectares. The number of beneficiaries, let me take a personal take on this, I think is a fairly poor proxy. The results framework is going to present some additional indicators, social indicators, which will enrich the social aspects of the contribution of the GBFF. But we do have to bear in mind that the focus of many GBFF projects are high value conservation areas. These are often geographically remote with very low human density in these areas. And so to some extent, it's to be expected that the number of beneficiaries will be lighter as a result of the low densities, low human densities in these areas. Many thanks to the additional comments from China, from Nicolas, Germany, and thank you also for Regina's proposal to focus on replicability. And I just wanted maybe to close at least my comments on this, distilling a few points on from the work program on the value proposition of GBFF as a whole, because we know that being nimble, flexible, agile has already been built into the design of the GBFF. But what we see from this work program is that the GBFF is also strengthening its inclusiveness with IPLCs, as we've seen, but also the private sector. And all these position the GBFF among the GEF family funds potentially as an innovation lab, where obviously there's higher risk, but also higher reward. And there's potential for learning lessons in the GBFF that can be applied that can be extended to the rest of the family of funds. I'll stop here and hand either back to Chiz or I think probably Noemi. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Chiz and Ben, for the answers to council. Let's go back to our list of speakers. So next in line will be Luciana, Navan, Ramon, Stephanie, and Joko-san. Luciana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Noemi, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. So we would like to welcome the work program and particularly commend the 23.5% allocation for IPLCs, which exceeds the fund's portfolio aspiration. We believe that ensuring engagement with IPLCs should remain a defining feature of the GBFF, recognizing their essential contributions to conservation, climate mitigation. So while we welcome this figure, we are convinced that this must be viewed as only a starting point. We believe that the scale of global benefits generated by IPLCs far exceeds current levels of financial support. Forest protection, water regulation, climate mitigation, and conservation of genetic resources, including those for agroecological systems, are services of planetary significance, and the GBFF should therefore explore ways to substantially deepen IPLC support, ensuring that those who deliver the greatest environmental benefits receive equitable retribution, access, and long-term support aligned with their governance systems. In this regard, we would like to express special appreciation for the Mayo Manglar project in Colombia, which advances mangrove conservation, community governance, sustainable value chains, and climate mitigation co-benefits. The project directly supports key elements of Colombia's NBSAP, including conservation of 34% of terrestrial inland water and marine coastal areas through protected areas, OECMs, and recognition of ethnic territories, consolidating territorial rights for indigenous, Afro-descendant, and Campesino communities, and restoring degraded areas to improve ecological connectivity, among other national commitments. We highlight the constructive role of IFIs, including CAP's leadership in the Biomanglar project. The increased participation of regional development banks must enhance country ownership, operational proximity, and disbursement efficiency, provided that consensuality remains safeguarded and country-driven priorities that should be fully respected. At the same time, we encourage continued efforts to accelerate programming implementation cycles and achieving the GBF targets should rely on predictable and the capacity of delivering results at scale while maintaining balance across regions and ecosystems, especially in megadiverse countries that generate a significant share of global environmental benefits. Finally, we would like to reiterate that GBFF must remain firmly anchored in the principles of demand-drivenness, equity, and country ownership. As implementation ramps up, it will be essential to preserve the concessional nature of the fund, ensure that guidance remains non-prescriptive, and avoid any trends that could inadvertently shift resources or decision-making power away from developing countries and their national institutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Luciana. So we still have 9 speakers requesting the floor. So in the interest of time, I would go through them all before we break to hear back from Chase and Ben, hoping to finalize around 9 so we keep 2 full hours for the next agenda item, which is resource mobilization. So if that's agreeable, Navan, floor is yours.
Thank you, Naomi. Good evening from Phnom Penh. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the East Asia constituency, we support the approval of the 28 million GBF work program, which mobilized 57 million in co-financing and delivery 3 impact projects across Colombia, Indonesia, and Madagascar. This work program demonstrates strong alignment with the Multilateral Global Biodiversity Framework and contribute to measurable global gain in mangrove protection, marine conservation, wildlife-based ecotourism, and community-led biodiversity governance. We note the significant emphasis of IPLC engagement, with 23.5% of resources directly support indigenous people and local community, exceeding the GBF target and reinforcing inclusive high right-based conservation. We acknowledge the strong innovation demonstrated through sustainable financing mechanism, ecotourism value chain, conservation trust fund, and community enterprise model. The portfolio shows robust policy coherence, gender responsiveness, and multi-sectoral coordination with an overall moderate risk profile consistent with GBF risk appetite. The work program also illustrates meaningful progress toward the fund portfolio level goal, including allocation for LDC and programming through IFI. As the GBFF advanced toward full programming of its first tranche, and in order to maintain momentum in advancing GBF target, we encourage the Secretariat and agency to pursue timely and streamlined process of all country submission. We are committed to working closely with the implementing agency to ensure high-quality strategic aligned proposal that contribute to global biodiversity outcome, and we encourage the expedite review progress ahead of the next council meeting in June 2026 to support full and efficient resource utilization. We support the approval of the working document, given the project proposal strong potential to generate global environmental benefit that would contribute to achieving 30 by 30 target. We also note the proposal relevant on biodiversity conservation, climate resilience, and sustainable livelihood. This intervention may provide value insight and relevant model for the country in implementing its program aimed at protecting the environment and natural resource sector. In line with this, the GEF Secretariat may consider the following to enhance the GBF responsiveness in realizing the biodiversity plan into action. First, consider placing greater focus on the blue economy and the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity in area beyond jurisdiction BBNJ, giving it potential contribution to meet the 30 by 30 target. This is particularly timely in light of BBNJ agreement into force in January 2026, and the designate of the GEF and its multiple trust fund as one of the financing mechanism for its implementation. Second, strengthen knowledge sharing mechanism to ensure the best practice and innovative approach from GEF project accessible and can be effectively tailored to unique ecological, socio-economic, and development context of various countries, including all countries in the East Asia constituency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Navan. I'll now give the floor to Ramón. Tienes la palabra.
Gracias, Noemí. En primer lugar, voy a intervenir en español. Primero quería dar las gracias a Chis y a Benjamin por el trabajo y por la presentación que nos han hecho. Queremos dar la bienvenida a este tercer programa de trabajo del Fondo del Marco Global de Biodiversidad, que incluye un importante nivel de cofinanciación. Gracias, Benjamin, por las explicaciones. Creemos que es importante seguir trabajando en apalancar recursos, especialmente en estas iniciativas destinadas a la protección, al fomento de la biodiversidad, que se suelen considerar menos atractivas en términos de rentabilidad o coste-eficiencia. Queremos destacar, igual que otros compañeros lo han hecho, el avance en la consecución de beneficios ambientales globales y el impulso a los objetivos del marco de Kunming-Montreal. Simplemente, bueno, al igual que Luciana, nos gustaría hacer mención al proyecto que recibe más financiación en el programa de trabajo, el proyecto en Colombia, desarrollado por CAF, un banco regional que trabaja por ser un banco verde en la región latinoamericana. El proyecto no solo supondrá la protección de los manglares, un ecosistema singular, su biodiversidad, sino que también generará cobeneficios como resultado de esa reducción de la deforestación y degradación forestal. Queremos destacar la importancia de la involucración de las comunidades locales y el beneficio para sus modos de vida, potenciando actividades sostenibles, útiles para la comunidad. Y con esto acabo, simplemente felicitar también a la Secretaría por el logro de los objetivos marcados en términos de financiación dirigida a poblaciones indígenas y comunidades locales, a SIDS y LDCs, y hacia instituciones financieras internacionales. Pues nada, felicitarlo por ello. Cuando lo negociamos en Brasil parecía imposible poder lograrlo todo y lo estamos haciendo. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Ramón, por tu intervention. Maintenant, on continue avec Stéphanie. Stéphanie, tu as la parole.
Bonjour à tous, je vais m'exprimer en français. Donc la France remercie les points focaux, les agences et le secrétariat pour la construction de ce programme que nous soutenons. Nous saluons en particulier le focus sur la protection de la biodiversité marine et notamment le soutien au fonds fiduciaire de conservation, en l'occurrence la Fondation pour les aires protégées et la biodiversité de Madagascar et le fonds Tanimeva à Madagascar, que l'Agence française de développement et le Fonds français pour l'environnement mondial ont contribué à créer et ont été parmi les premiers à financer il y a déjà de nombreuses années. Nous saluons également le fait que les projets visent à mobiliser des financements publics et privés et à rechercher la pérennité financière des projets après le financement du FEM. De ce point de vue, nous remercions Benjamin pour les explications sur l'importance des cofinancements et nous encourageons les efforts du secrétariat à poursuivre la recherche de cofinancement qui facilite la pérennité des projets et l'ampleur de leurs impacts. Nous saluons aussi dans ce programme de travail la diversité des agences, 3 différentes pour 3 projets, le soutien à Madagascar et donc en tant que PMA et aux IPLCs. De manière générale, nous saluons le fait que l'ensemble des engagements du GBFF jusqu'à présent atteignent les 3 cibles. Et comme le disait Ramon à l'instant, nous n'y croyons pas forcément à Brasilia en 2023 et vous y arrivez, nous y arrivons et c'est une très belle réussite. Néanmoins, nous serions intéressés d'avoir davantage de détails sur l'extension exceptionnelle qui a été attribuée à une agence pour le projet en Indonésie. Pour quelles raisons? Nous constatons également qu'en cumulé, à date, une agence bénéficie d'une part nettement plus élevée que toutes les autres institutions financières internationales réunies. Et donc, nous invitons le secrétariat à veiller à l'équilibre entre les agences, même si on est dans un processus compétitif. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Stéphanie, pour ton intervention. Now we will continue with Yoko-san, followed by Jonas, Aliu, Rashid, Ramson, and Larissa. Yoko-san, you have the floor.
Thank you, Noemi. Good morning, good evening to all. Much has been said by the previous speakers, so I'll be very brief. But Japan welcomes the proposed work program for the GBFF and appreciates that the project formulation is steadily progressing. We commend the GEF Secretariat work to date to select and review eligible projects in time for this council meeting. Especially, as France has also pointed out, we recognize diverse agencies utilizing the GBFF compared to the GEF Trust Fund and hope this trend continues for the future selection rounds as well. Thank you.
Many thanks, Joko-san. Jonas from Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Our constituency welcomes the proposed work program. While we support the proposed project by Manglar in Colombia, we find that strengthening the project's emphasis on women is essential since they are the main actors in piangua harvesting. The project documents will also benefit from some more information related to increased public and private funding, which is referred to in the document, as well as more information on the legal and institutional context for the project. Overall, the work program shows strong alignment with the KMGBF, and we are encouraged to see the high proportion of the funding benefiting IPLCs. In the interest of time, we'll provide more detailed comments in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonas. And as mentioned before, any written comments are very much welcome. Aliu, representing IPAC, floor is yours. Aliu, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Okay, now we hear you and we see. Yes,
All right.
welcome. Okay, you have the floor.
All right. Regarding the GBFF, IPAC underscores the importance of the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and in particular, its dedicated funding mechanisms, the GBFF, which is managed by the GEF. IPAC welcomes the GBF's aspiration target of allocating 20% of its portfolios to support actions led by indigenous people and local communities by 2030. We recognize the efforts and progress made to support indigenous people and local communities under this program of work and notes that the 3 highlighted projects, which were just presented, represents 23.5% of the GEF supports, which as requested. IPAC also acknowledges that to date, across and the overall and the portfolio of the GBFF reports that 32% of the project have been allocated to support actions by indigenous people and local communities. We encourage the GBFF to continue to strengthen meaningful engagement with indigenous people and local communities throughout the project design, implementation, and monitoring phase. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ali. Rachid, vous avez la parole. Rachid, si tu m'entends, c'est à toi, de parler. Bon.
Pardon.
Ok.
Oui,
Euh,
oui, pardon, Noémie.
oui, voilà. Maintenant, on t'entend
Bonjour.
bien, on te voit bien. Merci. Bienvenue.
Merci Noémie. Bonjour, bonsoir tout le monde. Le Maroc, au nom de la circonscription de l'Afrique du Nord, souhaite tout d'abord exprimer son soutien aux 3 projets de qualité présentés dans ce programme de travail. De notre point de vue, ces projets incarnent précisément le type d'action intégrée centrée sur les communautés et les écosystèmes que le GBFF a été conçu pour financer. Leur alignement sur plusieurs cibles du cadre de Conmine Montréal, notamment les cibles 1, 2, 3 et 22, est particulièrement appréciable. Cependant, notre analyse du document, en particulier du tableau 2 sur la distribution régionale, fait ressortir une préoccupation majeure. Certaines sous-régions comme la nôtre n'ont que peu bénéficié de ce fonds. Comme vous le savez, l'Afrique du Nord abrite des hotspots de biodiversité d'importance mondiale, qu'il s'agisse des écosystèmes côtiers méditerranéens, des forêts de cèdre de l'Atlas ou des zones humides et oasis sahariens, et qui sont soumis à des pressions immenses et leurs communautés dépendantes sont en première ligne des changements climatiques. Le principe de l'équilibre entre les régions est l'un des 7 critères de sélection fondateurs du GBFF. C'est à cet égard que nous devons veiller collectivement à ce qu'il soit pris en considération. Par conséquent, tout en approuvant le présent programme de travail, nous appelons le secrétariat du FEM et les agences d'exécution pour qu'ils intensifient leur appui technique aux pays d'Afrique du Nord dans la préparation de propositions solides et compétitives pour les prochaines phases de sélection. Et je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup, Rachid. On t'a bien entendu. I'll now give the floor to Ramson, who is the GBFF observer representing indigenous peoples and local communities. Welcome, Ramson, and floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the floor. My name is Ramson Karamushu, a Global Biodiversity Framework Fund observer representing indigenous peoples and local communities, or the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. I'm making these remarks on behalf of the IFP caucus with support also from the IPAG comments that have just been made by Alio recently. We appreciate and recognize the efforts that have been given to this progress made to support indigenous peoples and local communities under this program of work. IFB caucus to the CBD as well as IPAC to the GEF also acknowledges and encourages that to date across the overall portfolio, the GBFF reports that 23.5% of project funding have been allocated to support actions by indigenous peoples and local communities, exceeding the aspirational target. We encourage that the GBFF to continue strengthening meaningful engagement with indigenous peoples and local communities throughout project design, implementation, and monitoring. We further reiterate the design of the GBFF project to be adopted in the whole of the GEF family of funds and adopt a compelling aspirational target to support IPLCs. Finally, we are looking into greater project impact on the ground and encourage an inclusive project review process, opening room for the observers to engage and learn from the supported projects to monitor their progress and impact on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ramson. We have 2 remaining speakers and 1 written comment in the chat. Thanks, Anil. This is well received. I will now give the floor to Larissa, representing the West Asia constituency, followed by Barthélemy, who is an alternate member representing the Central Africa constituency. Larissa, bienvenue, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Noémie. Je représente plutôt la circonscription des pays côtiers, donc c'est de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Bonjour à tout le monde. Je voudrais vraiment, à la suite de mes prédécesseurs, notamment le représentant du Maroc, voilà, remercier en tout cas le secrétariat pour le programme de travail qui nous a été présenté et l'ensemble des informations portant en tout cas sur le bilan du DBBF sur 2025. Je voudrais en tout cas en termes de recommandations, en tout cas, appeler l'attention du secrétariat sur l'utilité d'améliorer ou de renforcer l'enveloppe qui est attribuée aux pays côtiers, eu égard à notre exposition justement à l'érosion côtière. Et justement, ce phénomène-là, on le sait tous, impacte essentiellement l'économie de ces pays-là. Donc, ce serait vraiment intéressant que pour le programme qui est proposé, vous puissiez prendre en compte justement les pays de la circonscription enfin, la circonscription des pays côtiers. Voilà. L'autre point, c'est concernant justement le renforcement des capacités. C'est vrai que le fonds a été lancé cette année avec les deux, trois appels à projets, mais il n'est pas toujours aisé en fait pour nous justement de s'approprier toute la procédure, les critères et les exigences qui sont liées justement à ce fonds. D'où mon soutien pour la recommandation du Maroc, qui est de dire il faut qu'on soit accompagné techniquement, que le secrétariat envisage justement assister techniquement les potentiels pays bénéficiaires afin qu'on puisse vous proposer des projets qui soient finançables par le FEM. Peut-être un dernier point, c'est vraiment de pouvoir saluer en tout cas le principe du cofinancement qui prend en compte le secteur privé, parce que pour le cas spécifique de la Côte d'Ivoire, l'essentiel de notre biodiversité qui est constituée par les forêts fait aujourd'hui l'objet justement de concessions au secteur privé pour nous permettre justement de restaurer en fait ces forêts qui sont pour la plupart dégradées. Donc c'est à saluer le fait que le secrétariat justement a intégré dans le principe du cofinancement le secteur privé. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Larissa, and thanks for the clarification. West Africa, coastal countries. Thank you. Thank you for your intervention. And now I will give the floor to Barthélémy. Vous avez la parole, Barthélémy. Bienvenue. Barthélémy, si vous êtes là, si vous nous entendez, est-ce que vous pouvez prendre la parole? Ah oui, maintenant. Yeah. Yeah, I saw that you unmuted yourself, but now you're muted again.
Oui.
There you go.
Est-ce
Oui,
que vous
maintenant, on
m'entendez
vous entend
déjà?
bien. Oui, on vous entend bien, Barthélémy. Merci, bienvenue.
Oui, Noémie, merci beaucoup de m'avoir donc passé cette tranche d'antenne pour me permettre au moins de parler au nom de la circonscription Afrique centrale. Et donc, puisque c'est la première fois que je prenne la parole, je voudrais exprimer donc toute ma gratitude donc à l'endroit du secrétariat du FEM pour avoir donc produit des rapports donc de qualité, pertinents et purement techniques, et donc qui ont permis donc à tout et chacun de pouvoir comprendre donc l'importance donc des appuis qui sont donnés au pays. Et donc, je voudrais aussi, au nom de la circonscription Afrique centrale, féliciter donc les résultats tangibles obtenus jusqu'à aujourd'hui, à travers les différents financements donc, du FEM donc, au pays de l'Afrique centrale et éventuellement de la circonscription Afrique centrale. Et la circonscription Afrique centrale note avec beaucoup de satisfaction donc, les différentes recommandations donc, formulées et approuvées par les membres du Conseil et souhaite des ajustements donc, nécessaires des portefeuilles pour faire face aux nombreux défis environnementaux auxquels les pays de la circonscription Afrique centrale sont donc confrontés aujourd'hui. La circonscription Afrique centrale encourage le FEM à poursuivre donc les interventions stratégiques et programmatiques en faveur des programmes intégrés dans le bassin du Congo, ce qui contribuera donc à l'atteinte de la neutralité carbone d'ici à 2050, vu la richesse bien évidemment de la circonscription Afrique centrale en termes donc de potentialité en biodiversité. Je voudrais aussi offrir les pays de la circonscription Afrique centrale sont très enclins à poursuivre donc le partenariat stratégique établi avec le FEM et les agences d'exécution pour une circonscription plus dynamique et plus prospère. et que, comme disait donc la collègue de la Côte d'Ivoire, il faudrait effectivement que les enveloppes soient des enveloppes ambitieuses pour permettre bien évidemment de faire face donc, à la perte de la biodiversité et aux différents défis environnementaux auxquels les pays de l'Afrique centrale sont donc confrontés aujourd'hui. Je voudrais aussi attirer l'attention donc du secrétariat du FEM sur la poursuite des programmes intégrés en faveur donc du bassin de Congo. Et vous savez que le bassin de Congo, c'est le bassin qui représente donc le deuxième poumon mondial, après donc l'Amazonie. Donc, j'aurais souhaité effectivement que les interventions soient donc diligentées et que des financements très ambitieux soient donc donnés aux pays de la circonscription Afrique centrale pour leur permettre véritablement de pouvoir donc lutter efficacement contre la perte de la biodiversité. Et donc, je salue aussi au nom de l'Afrique centrale, au nom de la circonscription donc Afrique centrale, la présentation qui a été faite donc sur le rapport donc du DBFF. En tout cas, ce financement est un financement contextuel et qui donc va à l'endroit donc des pays de l'Afrique centrale beaucoup plus parce qu'effectivement, comme je disais tantôt, on est dans un système où nous disposons bien évidemment d'une certaine potentialité en biodiversité et il faudrait que cette potentialité soit donc protégée et on salue bien évidemment déjà les efforts qui sont consentis par le secrétariat du FEM, mais il faudrait effectivement que les efforts continuent dans la même dynamique pour que nous puissions donc voir dans un avenir très proche donc les différentes interventions stratégiques et programmatiques, voire opérationnelles, qui pourront donc être diligentées en faveur donc de la biodiversité donc de l'Afrique centrale. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Barthélemy, pour votre intervention. So this brings us to the end of our speaker list for this agenda item. Thank you, everyone, for your good comments and interventions. So with that said, I will now hand it over to Chase and Ben for final remarks. So floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Noemi, and thank you very much for a very rich comments from all of you who took the floor. We will be very brief in our response and try to focus on specific suggestions and comments and questions that have come our way. Thank you for quite a number of suggestions that are made on geographical focus, as well as additional prioritization of issues such as blue economy, 30 by 30, oceans. And I think we heard from a number of people about the merit of having a robust knowledge sharing experiences. So we will certainly be looking into those. I think Larissa and others raised a question about opportunities to know and raise capacity for the access as well as other elements related to GBFF. We continue to make efforts to have those opportunities. We actually did a side event at the United Nations Environment Program, and we also ran a clinic because we knew that the deadline for the fifth selection round was just around the corner, which just basically closed yesterday. And we will also continue to try to build on other opportunities we have within the GEF Secretariat in our outreach with countries to be able to provide the kinds of information as well as capacity building sessions. One important question that got raised, I think it was by Stephanie from France, about the extensions. So this was one-time issue that all the agencies had to basically re-sign an FPA with a trustee, because there were some changes to the language from the FPA that they have signed with the other trust funds. There had to be a certain level of back and forth as well as approval process within certain agencies. And for some, that took a little bit of time. And what that meant is that the trustee was unable to actually release the resources for the PPGs that were approved. Our understanding is that particular issue has been resolved for all the agencies so far that have had the PPG requests approved. So we consider that to be a one-time issue, and it's a necessary administrative step that we needed to go through. On the question of agency balance resources, we will have more robust conversation on this because it's included in the progress report, and we do believe that having an overview across the PPGs that have been approved in the successive selection rounds, rather than just looking at the work program, which only has 3 projects, would be probably more robust and can provide additional context as well as information. And just to assure you that I think there is a fairly good balance among the agencies, as well as a much higher level of IFI engagement, which is a required target that is with the GBFF. There was a question about the limited number of projects from Rashid in the North Africa. You're right. We're cognizant of this. We've had a relatively small number of submissions so far, and we do think this is in an area where we also need to be raising further awareness as well as interest in the North African countries, as well as other regions that seem to be lagging behind a little bit, to be honest. So we've also made an effort to have an virtual engagements in some of the regional meetings that would target these regions, so that the messaging about the GBFF, how you go about accessing the resources, can be made available. So we have been making those efforts, and we need to do more of those. That is it from my side. Ben, would you like to come in on anything else?
Thank you very much, Chiz, and thank you to all the speakers as well. I'm just going to come back on 2 points very quickly. Primarily on the point raised by Luciana, as well as I think it's Aliou and Ramson on the involvement and the support for IPLCs. Luciana, I think we're very much aligned in the sense that this is only the beginning. As you know, we have designed IPLC guidelines, which have been submitted as an information document to this council meeting. But really, the proof is in the pudding, and we need to really ensure that these guidelines and that the broader engagement which we have been focusing on in the past few months with observers and IPLC representatives in particular, that all of that really translates into impact on the ground. And the results framework that our colleague Jurgis is going to present hopefully will help us achieve that. But I think continued engagement with IPAG, with observers and IPLC representatives at large on our engagement and on our support is going to be crucial. So this needs to be an ongoing process rather than, let's say, a one-time thing. And then also, just to reflect, I'm sorry, Nicolas, because we didn't address your point on LDCs. We do have obviously a target on SIDS and LDCs at 39% needs to be allocated to these categories of countries. The work programs do to some extent reflect this. In the last work program, we had a proposal for the Democratic Republic of Congo. This work program includes one for Madagascar. Hopefully the next one will also include one for Papua New Guinea. And overall, looking at the first 4 selection rounds, we do have a generous figure of, I think it's 43%, so well above actually the 39% right now at this point in time, which is allocated to SIDS and LDCs. I will stop here and hand back to Noemi with many thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much, Ben and Chiz. I think that I will pass it over to the co-chair, given that I see no further requests from the floor. So, Mr. Co-chair, back to you.
Thank you very much, Naomi, and thank you also, Ben and Chiz, for your presentation and responses to the range of questions, excellent range of questions from Council. Given that there's no other requests on the floor, I'd like to invite Council to adopt the draft decision that is included in document GEF/GBFF.05 2021/02 for approval. I don't see any requests from the floor. The decision is so approved. Thank you. And we'll now move on to agenda item number 4, which is the resource mobilisation strategy of the GBFF from 2025 to 2030. I would like to invite Chiz to be back again, and Sumit Kerr from the GEF Secretariat to introduce document GEF/GBFF.05/04 towards a resource mobilisation strategy of the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund from 2025 to 2030. Over to you, Chiz and Sumit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. I'm pleased to present the document towards a resource mobilization strategy for the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. Let's go to the next slide, please. I'm going to present the context of this document as well as a little bit of background that has led to the development of this document in front of you. Next slide, please. So, excuse me, Council in June of this year requested the Secretariat to develop a resource mobilization strategy for consideration at this particular Council. So for us, in developing this particular document, we analyze a range of different capitalization models, which is actually presented in this document, and also drawing lessons on lessons learned from comparable institutions and funds, as well as their recent resource mobilization strategies as well as plans. Based on a draft we pulled together, we conducted consultations and also invited written comments on the draft document. We engaged in this consultation with various groups, including the GBFF Council members, advisory group on non-sovereign participants, which is an important body to provide suggestions as well as recommendations to Council on the issues related to the participation of non-sovereign contributors. We also consulted with observers, the CBD Secretariat, the trustee, and the representative from the private sector, as well as a number of philanthropies. The document in front of you is therefore a reflection of many perspectives and comments received from various stakeholders. And I also would like to recognize there is a diversity of views shared with us. And so this is our best effort to present what has been discussed in consultations as well as what's out there in terms of the resource mobilization as well as resource mobilization plans and strategies. This document responds to the guidance that from the COP16, CBD COP16, which requested the GEF and the GBF Council to, quote, explore ways to enhance and strengthen predictability in financing the timely implementation of the framework, including through multi-annual pledges and consideration of the opportunities of voluntary indicative scale of contributions, and report hereon for consideration by COP17. So there is a specific COP guidance, and we are to be reporting on this particular COP guidance response at next year's COP. The document also responds and contributes to the CBD COP16 strategy for resource mobilization for the period of 2025 to 2030, which calls for the continuous and rapid robust capitalization of the GBFF. And lastly, this document is also very aligned with the GEF 9 replenishment process, and this is all based on the family of funds principle. Next slide, please. Thank you. So let me briefly present the key status of the GBFF. The CBD COP15 decision from December 2022 established the GBFF to support implementation of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The GBFF has been established to accept voluntary contribution from all sources, and this is done on a rolling basis. The fund does not operate on the replenishment model like the GEF Trust Fund. Since it was launched in August 2023, the fund has received cumulative contributions totaling $388.6 million from 11 sovereign donors and 1 subnational donors. And all the contributions are pooled and programmed in accordance with the GBFF program directions and policy on allocation of resources. And these documents had been discussed and approved by Council. Next slide, please. Regarding the GBFF programming, let me recall that the GBFF policy on allocation of resources states that a new programming tranche is open every time and an additional $250 million in pledges to the GBFF have been confirmed by the trustee, or 18 months have passed since the prior tranche was open, whichever comes first. So the first tranche was opened in February 2024 and already programmed or set aside $201.6 million in 3 selection rounds. The second tranche opened in August 2025, which is 18 months after the opening of the first tranche, with the available resources of $161.8 million. And I note that the demand for the GBF resource is quite robust, and each call for proposal has been heavily subscribed with a lot of interest as well as a lot of demand. Now, GBFF will need new and additional resources to continue its programming. What has been contributed so far? We are basically moving ahead to program in the second and the first tranches. And the first tranche is completed, and the second tranche, we just closed the 5th selection round. And our anticipation is the resources will be utilized to approve the selected PPGs that are coming through in the 5th selection round. So from here on, my colleague Sumit will present the proposed path forward as well as proposed financial scenarios. So over to you, Sumit.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Sumit Kaur, and let me share with you the rest of the document. This document aims to forge a new path ahead to convert ambition into impact. In the document, we want to outline a structured approach to unlock new sources of finance and substantially increase funding from all sources. We know that the context for global financial flows is evolving, and so we want to be proactive in identifying new opportunities. This means that we should be bold, agile, open to new approaches, but also importantly proceed with efficient. We seek to reduce the complexity and fragmentation in biodiversity financing. And lastly, this is about more than just money. It's that biodiversity finance flows predictably, inclusively, efficiently, and for driving systems change. Here you see the vision for the document. The key elements are really about unlocking new resources to secure the continuous, rapid, and robust capitalization of the fund from all sources at the scale required to turn the ambitions of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework into measurable impact. Towards that, the Council may consider 2 financial scenarios, which are presented in the coming slides, to enable resource mobilization in line with CBD commitments. The purpose of this document is to enhance the capitalization of the fund, that is to bring in new and additional contributions into the fund. There's 2 key objectives driving this, which respond to the CBD's call for 1, the adequacy, predictability, and timely flow of funds, and 2, to increase substantially and progressively the level of financial resources from all sources. These objectives rest on 4 pillars. The first is sovereign partners who can support predictable resources. And then turning to the next 3 pillars on non-sovereign partners. The second pillar focuses on expanding contributions from subnational and regional public institutions. The third on cultivating new partnerships with philanthropy. And the fourth on activating the private sector as a new channel for contributions. This document discusses how to strategically engage each pillar, considering the unique priorities, opportunities, and challenges across each space. We must simultaneously be ambitious and bold while balancing pragmatism. Here, I will briefly share some of the key actions. Further details are in the document under each pillar and also in Annex 3 under the implementation plan. First, to note that positioning the value proposition of the fund is important. This will be driven by the impact achieved and will require tailored communications about the fund's efficiency, science-based approach, and inclusiveness, as well as its accountability to the CBD. Another key action relates to enhancing predictability of financing. To respond to the CBD COP16 guidance, the document proposes the creation of an ad hoc working group. We'll have more on this on the next slide. As we seek to broaden and diversify the donor base, this will be underpinned by strategic mapping across each pillar, targeted outreach, and tapping into existing networks to reach a broader audience. In regard to pledging events, these may be biennial, centered around the CBD COPs, where partners are invited to make multi-annual pledges, although noting that the GBFF will continue to be able to receive voluntary contributions on a rolling basis. And as we seek to attract non-sovereign contributors, a key action is to explore new tools and financial instruments. For example, the creation of windows where resources are ring-fenced for a particular purpose. In accordance with the GBFF establishment document, any such potential windows would be brought for Council's decision. Here we can see the draft terms of reference for the ad hoc working group on predictability and financing, which is in Annex 5 of the document. The scope of work responds to the CBD COP16 request to explore ways to enhance and strengthen predictability in financing the timely implementation of the fund. Since this is to be reported to the CBD COP17, the working group will present its recommendations to the 6th meeting of the GBFF Council, which is expected to take place in June 2026. The GEF Secretariat will facilitate the working group and request that nominations are submitted to the CEO by January 5th, 2026. And the proposed composition of the working group includes 1, interested council members and alternates with an equal number of representatives from contributors to and recipients of GEF family of funds, with a minimum of 3 in each category. Secondly, up to 2 representatives from the advisory group of non-sovereign participants. And thirdly, a representative from the CBD Secretariat. Next, let's take a look at financial scenarios outlined in the document. This document presents 2 indicative financial scenarios. Scenario A, $900 million from 2026 to 2030. This would enable 1 full programming tranche of $250 million every 18 months to be supported by sovereign partners. So this translates to an annualized contribution total of $150 million per year or $750 million over 5 years. And second, an increasing share of contributions from non-sovereign partners with a target of $150 million over 5 years, with a continued effort to explore options to further increase this share over time to reduce reliance on traditional donor partners. Then we have financial scenario B, $1.625 billion from 2026 to 2030. This would enable 1 full programming tranche of $250 million every year to be supported by sovereign partners. Of $375 million over 5 years. This is a visual representation of scenario A. Over a 5-year period between 2026 to 2030, this scenario of $900 million represents 0.81% of target 19A. In blue, you see 250 million programming tranches every 18 months, so 3 in total, supported by sovereign partners. In orange, you see non-sovereign contributions, and this represents 17% of total resources over the 5 years. Just to put this in perspective, currently the non-sovereign share is 0.29%, or less than 0.5% of the total contributions to the fund. This is to share a visual representation of scenario B. Over a 5-year period between 2026 to 2030, this scenario of $1.625 billion represents 1.47% of target 19A. In blue, you see 250 million programming tranches every year, so 5 in total, supported by sovereign partners. In orange, you see non-sovereign contributions representing 23% of total resources over the 5 years. With that, I conclude this presentation. Thank you, and I hand back to the co-chair and Naomi.
Thank you, Chiz and Sumit, for those presentations. I'd now like to invite representatives of the advisory group and non-sovereign participants to the GBFF to address the council.
Thank you very much. Good morning from North America. Thank you for giving Quebec the opportunity to speak on behalf of the fast-growing GBFF Advisory Committee. I would like to begin by emphasizing that the Advisory Committee fully supports the work accomplished to date and strongly endorses the objective of increasing the fund's overall financing, diversifying its sources, and improving the predictability of contributions. Securing and strengthening sorry about that, GBFF financing is essential to the successful implementation of the GBF. The resource mobilization strategy is ambitious, and rightly so, given the scale and urgency of the GBF's objectives. Its success will depend on maintaining the engagement of existing partners while rapidly expanding partnerships to significantly increase non-sovereign contributions from the current 0.3% to 17% or potentially up to 23%. The Advisory Committee is committed to supporting the ad hoc working group on predictability and to sharing practical lessons learned from its members, including Quebec, Berlin, Brazil, as well as from 2 resource mobilization experts, Mrs. Simone Bauch and Mrs. Stéphanie Capdeville. We stand ready to facilitate strategic connections and provide guidance on effective approaches to mobilizing non-sovereign contributions. On a more specific note, Quebec would be pleased to host future pledging moments or calls to action at Place Québec, which we plan to reestablish during COP17 in Armenia in October 2026. This place will foster cooperation and collaboration aligned with the GBF objectives. As a subnational government member and co-chair of several biodiversity networks, Quebec can play a bridging role between the GBFF and local and regional actors. Quebec views the GBFF as a key instrument to support the implementation of the GBF and will continue to actively champion its role. The Advisory Committee welcomes the strategy's innovation, robust monitoring, and exploration of new instruments, which will enable adaptive management and support strong, measurable results. We also support the dual approach of securing core funding while allowing, subject to council approval, of course, the development of targeted programs to attract private and philanthropic contributions. In conclusion, this strategy is crucial and critical to achieving the objectives of the GBF. The Advisory Committee and Quebec stand really ready to support its implementation, strengthen partnership, and encourage increased contributions. Together, we can mobilize the resources needed to deliver meaningful impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frédéric, for your comments on behalf of the advisory group. I'd now like to open the floor for questions and comments on this agenda item from council members. I'll hand over to you, Naomi, if you could manage requests from the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. The floor is now open. Garth, Canada, thanks for breaking the ice. Floor is yours, alternate member.
Thanks, Naomi. Thanks, Richard. Morning, or good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. First off, a big thanks to Chiz and Samit for the presentation. We appreciate the work of the GEF Secretariat on this document, and we're supportive of many of the actions outlined in the document to mobilize resources from all sources to ensure continuous, rapid, and robust capitalization of the fund. We appreciate the inclusion and alignment of this work with the KM-GBF targets and relevant CBD decisions, which underscore that the GBFF remains fully responsive to and guided by COP decisions. However, as currently written, we cannot support the adoption of this document. Our concern is that the approach conditions future programming tranches on sovereign donor contributions with other sources of funding seen as complementary. While we recognize efforts to diversify funding, in our view, the proposed target for other sources remains too modest. As the fund's largest contributor, Canada had hoped that our initial public funding would help leverage and catalyze contributions from other sources rather than be seen as a fixed baseline expectation. This catalytic approach is critical from our perspective, as the GBFF is intended to be complementary to the GEF Trust Fund Biodiversity Focal Area, which is funded solely by sovereign contributions. So while we think this document contains a lot of good things and goes in the right direction, we also think there's more work to be done to develop a more ambitious approach to mobilizing other sources of funding, including non-sovereign contributions. Such an approach should aim to meaningfully increase the share of funding from other sources over time and ensure that future programming tranches don't hinge solely on sovereign funding. In our view, this would better reflect the GBFF's mandate and structure. So in terms of the way forward, we would propose that the RM strategy be revised and presented again to Council at the 6th GBFF meeting. And in order to facilitate this, today we can support creation of the ad hoc working group on predictability of finance, but we would suggest that the mandate of this group be expanded to develop recommendations for revising the RM strategy. We have amended decision text for Council to consider that reflects this proposal, and I'll share it in the chat following my intervention. And we would also propose that the terms of reference for the working group be amended to reflect this proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Garth. And indeed, if you could put it in the chat, that would be very helpful so everyone in this meeting can have access to it and we can further discuss. I'll now give the floor to Faisal, Nicholas, Stefan, and Regina. So Faisal from the CSO Network, floor is yours.
Co-Chair Richard, Naomi, and participants. GEF CSO Network welcomes the resource mobilization strategy of the GBF Fund. Having adequate and predictable resources is critical to the operation and success of the fund and helping progress towards the goals and objectives of the KM-GBF by 2030. From the civil society perspective, predictability matters as much as scale. Multi-year commitments and clearer funding trajectories are essential for countries, indigenous peoples, and local communities to plan and deliver long-term biodiversity action. We also welcome efforts to broaden the contributor base, but as mentioned by Canada, we would like to see or hope to see an even greater multiplier effect in leveraging additional resources. We believe it's important to include engagement with philanthropy and the private sector. At the same time, it would be important to ensure that new funding sources strengthen rather than dilute accountability, safeguards, and the rights-based orientation of the GBFF to avoid the risk of greenwashing. We would like to remind everyone of the commitments made in the recent CBD COP16 to substantially increase the resource flows for biodiversity to up to $20 billion per year. In this context, we believe that the funding target of the GBFF should be higher than both of the two scenarios highlighted in the paper. We therefore urge support for scenario B of $250 million per year or $1.65 billion over 5 years, including non-sovereign contribution, to be seen as the floor or minimum level for funding to be secured. We would also like to draw on the experience from the success of the replenishment of the GEF Trust Fund in generating predictable resources that enable long-term planning, contrasting to the challenges faced, as we have heard in the last 2 days, by LDCF and SCCF when using only a voluntary contribution model, leading to a narrow contribution base and inadequate long-term resources. As resource mobilization scales up, we would also encourage attention to how funding can move more quickly and predictably from pledges to accessible support on the ground, particularly for Indigenous people and local communities and other local actors. Finally, we encourage continued transparency on how the mobilized resources will translate into real access and impact at the country and community level. The GEF CSO network looks forward to continued engagement as the resource mobilization strategy is implemented and refined to help ensure the GBFF delivers adequate financing that is credible, inclusive, and fit for purpose. We also thank the Secretariat for their ongoing work to ensure efficient implementation of the GBFF, support the involvement of CSOs, IPLC, women and youth, as well as secure long-term financing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Faisal. Nicholas, floor is yours.
Thank you, Noemi. Germany would also like to thank the Secretariat for all the hard work that has gone into this draft resource mobilization strategy. And we'd also like to highlight that we do see that a lot of our written comments have now been implemented in this new draft. However, like Canada, we also think that it requires a bit more work and can't be adopted as is. And therefore, we support the proposal by Canada to amend the council decision to what has been posted in the chat, in particular to set up the working group and then have the working group work on recommendations for the Secretariat to propose a new version of the document at this 71st GEF Council meeting or the 6th GBFF Council meeting. And we'd be happy to be a member of that working group. The reason is just in very short terms that the GBFF's innovative setup means that the funding should come from all sources, especially private and non-traditional donors, and there shouldn't be an over-reliance on traditional donor contributions. Maybe 2 additional points. The voluntary indicative scale of contributions, or VISC, is also mentioned in the document, and this would indeed correspond to COP guidance if it were explored further. But we want to stress that it would be very important that non-traditional donors are also included in any structured burden sharing model. And secondly, regarding funding via bonds that is suggested in the document, we were wondering if the Secretariat has assessed whether coupon payments are actually feasible under the GBFF's limited core funding and allocation model. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. We'll now continue with Stefan, Regina, Eitor, Priyanka, and then we will give some minutes to Chis and Sumit to respond before we go back to the list of speakers. So with that said, Stéphane, vous avez la parole.
Merci Noémie. Bonjour à tous, chers collègues. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Tout d'abord pour dire que pour nous, il s'agit d'un axe de travail très important et nous remercions tout le travail déjà accompli par le secrétariat pour formuler ces propositions. Chizuru a rappelé notamment en introduction le lien avec la décision COP16 pour améliorer la prédictabilité des financements en biodiversité. J'ajouterai pour ma part une référence à la décision COP15 au cadre de Coumi-Montréal, puisque lorsque nous avons créé ensemble le GBFF, l'une des valeurs ajoutées, l'une des spécificités de ce fonds, c'était bien sa capacité à mobiliser les financements de toutes sources. Paragraphe 32, décision 15/7. Donc c'est vraiment quelque chose qui est profondément inscrit dans l'ADN du GBFF. Et malheureusement, c'est l'un des axes sur lequel il faut bien reconnaître que nous avons le moins progressé. Alors, cela étant dit, dans le draft de stratégie, il y a beaucoup de propositions positives, hein. Renforcer l'outreach, cartographier les sources de financement, explorer des fenêtres de financement dédiées qui permettraient de flécher les fonds, réfléchir à des instruments innovants, des levées obligataires, etc., etc. Des cycles biannuels de refinancement, tout cela, ce sont des choses très positives. Mais comme le Canada et l'Allemagne avant moi, nous estimons qu'il y a encore besoin de poursuivre l'ouvrage et que nous ne sommes pas prêts à adopter ce document aujourd'hui, notamment parce que les scénarios financiers nous posent un problème de principe. Les engagements financiers du cadre de Kunming-Boel sont des engagements financiers collectifs qui ne distinguent pas suivant les institutions ou suivant les vecteurs. Et donc, ça veut dire que chacun des bailleurs, chacun des donateurs est libre d'allouer ses financements via des institutions multilatérales, des fonds, des agences bilatérales, et que s'engager sur un scénario financier remettrait en cause toute cette philosophie. Et donc, à cet égard, d'ailleurs, nous pensons qu'il est malvenu de comparer, et qui n'est pas aidant, même contre-productif, de mettre en rapport la taille du GBFF avec la cible 19A, pour les raisons que je viens d'évoquer. Donc tout ça pour dire que nous soutenons la proposition du Canada de revoir et d'élargir les termes de référence du groupe de travail ad hoc. Comme l'Allemagne, nous nous portons volontaires pour y participer. J'ajouterai quelques commentaires sur ce groupe de travail. Tout d'abord, s'agissant de sa composition, ça a été, je pense que l'intervention de la représentante de l'Advisory Group était très parlante. Nous pensons que ce groupe peut contribuer efficacement au groupe ad hoc et donc on aimerait déplafonner le nombre de participants de l'Advisory Group dans l'ad hoc Working Group. Et ma deuxième remarque, c'est qu'il est important pour nous que les réunions de ce working group se fassent à coût nul, donc de manière virtuelle, et que si des réunions physiques étaient bien envisagées, elles soient adossées à des conseils. Et je pense que j'ai fait tous mes points. Voilà, merci.
Merci beaucoup, Stéphane, pour votre intervention. I'll now give the floor to Regina. Floor is yours.
Gracias, Noemi. Our constituency acknowledges the efforts to strengthen the GBF's long-term sustainability. Ensuring predictable resources is essential. We also emphasize the importance of guaranteeing that private sector priorities remain aligned with the convention served by the GBFF. In this regard, has the GEF Secretariat considered that under the current proposal in the resource mobilization strategy, newly engaged actors may seek a role in certain GBFF decision-making processes? It is crucial that regardless of the funding sources involved, the principle of country ownership remains at the core of all decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Regina. And now I'll give the floor to Aitor, GBFF observer representing the youth. Aitor, welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you, Noemi. Speak on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network and the Youth Observers. We welcome the resource mobilization strategy and we highlight the inclusive process through which observers were consulted and able to provide written inputs, many of which were appropriately reflected in the final document. We express our gratitude to the entire GBFF team. The strategy comes at a critical moment as the biodiversity finance landscape faces increasing constraints and projected reductions in the official development assistance. This context calls for enhanced ambition in renewable international solidarity. In this regard, the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund stands as concrete demonstration that developed countries can and must deliver their commitments under the Global Biodiversity Framework. We also want to emphasize both the importance and precautions associated with mobilizing private resources. First, regarding private philanthropy, match funding arrangements should be actively pursued, particularly with partnerships with community-based or regional funds that already operate as trusted institutions at the grassroots level. The establishment of thematic or programmatic windows is also a highly effective approach to align priorities and increase impact. In this context, a dedicated window to support indigenous peoples and local communities with a strong focus on improving direct access should be seriously considered. The experience of the GBFF could also be considered as a blueprint with the broader GEF Trust Fund. We kindly recommend that the Council consider the creation of such a window at its next meeting or after the meeting that will approve the resource mobilization strategy. Second, the private sector engagement must be fully aligned with the resource mobilization strategy of the KMGBF. Coherence between the KMGBF and the GBFF should be explicitly reflected in the implementation process. As outlined in the resource mobilization strategy of the KMGBF, robust and socio-environmental safeguards, as well as the assessment of impacts on human rights, must be treated as non-negotiable prerequisites when mobilizing private finance. Additionally, strengthening due diligence in process are necessary to prevent greenwashing or putting GBFF's reputation at risk. Finally, we welcome the establishment of the ad hoc working group and encourage consideration of observers' engagement into the process, subject to their availability and interest, including invitations for observers to follow the meetings schedules over the coming months. We kindly recommend that the Council considering adding a reference for observers in the future version of the strategy. Thank you, Noemi. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Aitor. Now we will continue with GBFF observers. Now going to Priyanka, who is representing the women, and then we will hear from the Secretariat. Priyanka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm representing the CBD Women's Caucus along with EDA. We would also like to acknowledge the development of the proposed resource mobilization strategy for the GBFF. The effort to articulate a clear vision for predictable and diversified financing and inclusion is commendable. And we also would like to thank GBFF for including us particularly as observers in consultations. We are happy to see that some of the comments that have made it into the document. However, commenting a bit from the gender perspective, we note that the strategy remains largely focused on the scale and sources of financial contribution. We hope to see that this strategy will translate beyond the mobilization of financial commitments into meaningful pathways for direct access, equitable distribution, and transformative impact on the ground, and that financing serves more as a catalyst for broader systematic change rather than an end in itself. While capitalization is essential, equal emphasis is needed on ensuring that resources reach women and women-led organizations directly, indigenous people and communities, and provide a sense of biodiversity stewardship that is often underfunded. Echoing what our other youth observer has said, I would also like to again point out that The private financing conversation that has come up recently has to be in line with KMGBF and should protect the rights of people involved in the ground. And the Women's Caucus looks forward to seeing the strategy evolve as a pathway, not only for financing, but for strengthening inclusive governance, accountability, and gender responsive implementation. We encourage the GBFF Council to strengthen this strategy by explicitly linking resource mobilization to gender responsive allocation, access modalities, and implementation mechanisms. We appreciate the leadership shown by the GEF, and we hope to see that we are included in the resource mobilization strategy process in the upcoming days. As now it's only acknowledged, but over the days we hope to be like more part of it. And again, coming back to the private financing question, we hope that it kind of acknowledges what KMGBF, how KMGBFF talks about resource mobilization strategy and how private financing has to be done with a lot of caution when it comes to dealing with people and community. So thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Priyanka. Now let's give some minutes to Chase and Sumit to respond to these very good comments. And then I will continue back with Wang, Luciana, Jokosan, Rashida, and Ramon. So with that said, back to you, Chase.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for this the comments as well as perspectives shared. As I said at the onset of the presentation, when we started to pull this document together and also started the consultations, it was clear to us that there are many different perspectives, many different sort of priorities, the level of ambition, and also the fundamental question as to who is responsible for resource mobilization at the end of the day for this particular fund, as well as for the achievement of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So appreciate once again a lot of good comments being provided, as well as suggestions. And I take first and foremost that we appreciate already certain council members and their willingness to serve on the proposed working group, and different suggestions being put on the table on the potential expansion of the proposed terms of reference for the working group. So I think this is a conversation that we also would like to hear from the second and third rounds, perhaps, of the comments to be provided today, and we will see what would be a collective agreed way forward on these elements. And also, I also very much appreciate the support for the work being done so far. And I think we mentioned this during the consultations. I don't think the GEF has had a resource mobilization strategy as is. So this has been an effort for us to look to other funds and other institutions and existence of resource mobilization plans, as well as resource mobilization strategies. So this has been an effort of learning on our side to really understand what exactly ought to be put into a resource mobilization strategy document. And I think that iterative nature of our learning is also reflected in the title of this document. It is towards a resource mobilization strategy for GBFF. Now, I think there are a number of comments put on the table regarding the specific elements. Germany's, Nicholas, your comment about the VISC and how this needs to be explored further. By all means, I think this is in response to the COP guidance. So we as the GEF would need to do this. So any suggestions you might have on the way in which this could be done, and potentially with the engagement of the working group, very welcome to us. Let us see how this could be done. And also, Stefan, you had some concrete suggestions about removing the caps. Again, this is the collective decision to be taken by the council, and we'd be happy to support whatever the terms of reference as well as its markup as it would come. And we also hear thank you for very specific suggestions that have come from the youth as well as other observers. And just to highlight what we have come to realize, which is different stakeholders as well as different people have expectations as well as views on what ought to be included in a resource mobilization strategy. So this is an element that we have tried to address in the current draft by addressing as many feedback as possible. But ultimately, we would really like to get some clarity on what would be a good way forward from council. There was a specific question on bonds as well as coupon payments, as well as windows and due diligence. So I'm going to ask Sumi to come in here on those questions.
Thanks, Shiz. And first, I also just want to express my sincere thank you to everybody that has been so really so engaged in the consultation process and the development of this document across all the stakeholder groups who are present here today. Thank you so much. And so I'll respond to two specific questions, one from Germany about the bonds at this stage in the document, this is really, we're proposing that we really need to be open to all sorts of new tools and financial instruments. So this is really suggesting that we should explore this option. It's not committing us to it at this stage. So it's among other options that could be considered. So the option of a bond issuance, if you look at Annex 2 of the document, you'll see that we looked at a variety of different capitalization models. And amongst them, relevant to bonds, as we know, the Climate Investment Fund, CIF, have launched their CCMM mechanism earlier this year, and that's a very different model. It was launched in London Stock Exchange, and they primarily invest in clean energy investments, and so there's mechanisms there to repay the coupon as well as the principal. The other model that's also presented in Annex 2 is the example from Gavi, which is the Vaccine Alliance, and they have what's called IFIM, which is the International Finance Facility for Immunization, and they've been issuing bonds for close to 2 decades. And their bonds are really backed by long-term pledges from donor governments. And so we don't know what the path ahead could potentially look like for GBFF, but we do know that with the 2030 targets, there is a case to be made for front-loading resources. So this option is complex. It involves a lot of transaction costs. And so it's not something we're racing into, but we want to sort of keep, as I said, all options, all tools, financial mechanisms on the table, particularly, thinking of ways to draw in new types of private capital, leveraging, existing assets that we have in the fund. So very briefly, we've had a preliminary discussion with the World Bank Treasury, and on the premise of that is really what we brought this forward as an option into the document. So this doesn't exist exactly. We would need to, as others have in the past, this is something we would have to innovate and in our unique way, but we know at least 2 models that have done this, and ultimately in the biodiversity sector specifically, which is not a revenue generating sector hugely, we would be looking at some sort of Gavi type model, where it's multi-year commitments to contributions that would back the bond issuance, should we choose to explore that path. Secondly, let me just turn to very good questions and suggestions around windows, which also came up quite a bit in the consultations. So the establishment document of the GBFF actually outlines that there's the potential to create windows, which is ring fencing resources for a particular topic or theme. And so when we think about windows and it's presented in the document, our proposal is really that this should be a selective process. The creation of windows comes with its own risks of fragmentation. And so really it should be a selective process that really enhances and complements existing programming. So how to go about the process, it's a matching, it's a marketplace. We would need to match supply. As we talk to potential new types of contributors, we would need to see what they express to us in terms of their interests, and we match it with the demand of what the real needs are. GBFF is country-led. We also hear needs as expressed through our various observer groups, and so this is something that as the implementation of the strategy moves forward, we would draft and put together and bring for council's decision. And then lastly, to say that, this would all happen within the existing framework of the World Bank trustees' risk-based assessment when we're looking at new types of contribution sources, new types of non-sovereign contributions. So, to the point of, we don't want to, new contributors should not be, in any way diluting the commitments that we have in CBD and, with the GBFF fund, but that really they should strengthen and enhance. So all of this would happen within the existing risk-based assessment framework concerning due diligence and avoiding conflict of interest. That's very important and also top of mind for us. So thank you. I'll pass back to Noemi.
Thank you very much, Chis and Sumit, for the very useful responses. Going back to the list of participants, we will start with Wang, Luciana, Joko-san, Rashid, and Ramon. So Wang, you have the floor.
Thank you, Naomi. We thank the Secretariat for preparing this report and welcome the overall direction of the strategy. I believe the strategy provides a clear response to the KMGBF's urgent calls for adequate, predictable, and timely funding, and outline the strategy way forward to the GBFF. We take note of the four-pillar approach, which systematically plans for a diversified funding base. This will help reduce reliance on any single source and enhance the overall financial resilience. We'd like to highlight the need to ensure the strategy's adaptability and to manage the risk associated with the diversification. While broadening the contributor base is important, the complexities it may bring should be carefully addressed. Regarding the exploration of the potential windows, we stress that any consideration must fully integrate the principles of avoiding fragmentation and conducting the conflict of interest reviews to ensure alignments with the core resources mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wang. Luciana, floor is yours.
Thank you, Noemi. We underscore the importance of securing predictable multi-year financing for the KM-GBF. Achieving the 2030 targets requires a resource base that is stable, adequate, and insulated from short-term political and market fluctuations, and mechanisms to monitor donor contributions and minimize volatility, particularly for private and philanthropic sources, are essential for safeguarding planning horizons and ensuring countries can implement long-term biodiversity strategies without exposure to unpredictable financial cycles. Proposals to create these multiple thematic windows, advisory bodies, and parallel structures should be carefully assessed. While innovation is welcome, any expansion of the fund's architecture must avoid governance fragmentation, as has been said, duplication of functions, or dilution of CAP mandates, which could complicate access for developing countries and weaken institutional coherence. Country ownership must remain at the center of the GBFF operations. Competitive calls, co-financing expectations, and private sector requirements should not disadvantage countries facing structural constraints or shift the burden of risk onto national institutions. Programmatic direction must continue to be determined through parties' priorities and national biodiversity strategies. We reaffirm the need to preserve full additionality and complementarity between the GBFF and the GEF Trust Fund, particularly in the biodiversity focal area. The two mechanisms should work synergistically, avoiding overlaps and ensuring that resources remain aligned with the guidance of the CBD COP. Finally, allocation discussions should reflect the global environmental benefits generated by mega-diverse countries whose ecosystems underpin biodiversity, climate regulation, water systems, food security, and genetic resources for the entire planet. Ensuring equitable access for these countries is essential for the effectiveness and legitimacy of the fund. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Luciana. Joko-san, floor is yours.
Thank you, Noemi. I would like to echo my previous speakers of Canada, France, and Germany. And Japan welcomes the development of the first draft strategy for resource mobilization. We would like to highlight the significant feature of the GBFF of being able to receive funding from all sources, including non-sovereign partners, and that we pay close attention to progress in this regard. Therefore, the strategy should fully leverage this feature. In this regard, the indicative financial scenario indicates that contributions of US $250 million per year or every 18 months to be made solely by sovereign partners. However, the basis for this calculation is not clear. The policy on allocation of resources for the GBFF stipulates that the tranche is activated once the remaining fund reaches this amount, but this does not distinguish between contributions from sovereign and non-sovereign partners. Since it is important for the GBFF to secure resources from all sources, contributions from sovereign and non-sovereign partners should not be considered separately. Regarding the annual target amounts, in scenarios progressively increase every year. We appreciate the ambitious and proactive approach, but we question whether there is such prospect for securing contributions, and realistic figures based on specific assumptions should be provided. Therefore, Japan cannot adopt the strategy as presented and support the decision text proposed by Canada. And we believe that at this council meeting, decisions should focus on establishing an ad hoc working group to continue reviewing this draft strategy, and that should be further discussed at the 6th council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joko-san. I'll now give the floor to Rachid, followed by Ramon. Rachid, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup Noémie. Au nom de la circonscription de l'Afrique du Nord, je souhaite tout d'abord saluer la présentation de cette première stratégie de mobilisation des ressources. La vision d'une capitalisation continue, rapide et robuste du GBF répondrait à l'ambition du cadre mondial pour la biodiversité. Nous soutenons l'approche structurée autour de 4 piliers. Le pilier 1, visant à sécuriser des contributions prévisibles des partenaires souverains, constitue la pièce maîtresse de cette stratégie. En effet, les 2 scénarios financiers indicatifs A et B sont utiles, mais eu égard à l'urgence en matière de préservation et de reconstitution de la biodiversité nationale et mondiale, nous devons collectivement viser le scénario B le plus ambitieux. Atteindre 250 millions de dollars par an est un minimum pour permettre une tranche de programmation annuelle offrant la prévisibilité dont nos pays ont largement besoin pour planifier. Nous soutenons également la création du groupe de travail ad hoc sur la prévisibilité du financement. Ce groupe devra examiner des mécanismes innovants tels que des engagements pluriannuels et qui permettent de dépasser le cycle budgétaire annuel de nombreux donateurs. La stabilité financière du fonds, en effet, en dépend. Et je vous remercie de votre attention.
Merci beaucoup, Rachid. Ramón, tienes la palabra, followed by Jonas and Andrea.
Gracias. Voy a intervenir en español.
Ramón, perdón que te interrumpa, pero no te vemos. Vemos solamente el fondo de pantalla. No sé si tienes tu cámara, tal vez.
¿Ahora?
Ya te vemos. Listo. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Adelante.
Consideramos que esta estrategia es muy relevante para intentar responder a las peticiones de la COP en cuanto a mejorar la predictibilidad y el alcance de este fondo. Y creemos que es fundamental promover, como me han comentado otros, la ampliación de la base de donantes, tanto países como gobiernos subnacionales y otros niveles, sector privado y filantrópico. Y en este sentido apoyamos la necesidad de potenciar acciones de comunicación, visibilidad y alcance del fondo. Vemos muy positivo el ejercicio que se ha incluido en el anexo 2, donde se valoran distintas opciones de capitalización. Se ha hablado un poco de la emisión de bonos en mercado de capitales. Es verdad que el Fondo de Tecnologías Limpias de los TIF tiene una temática diferente a de lo que estamos hablando aquí, pero yo creo que es interesante explorar opciones. Valoramos positivamente también que se hayan identificado indicadores para el seguimiento de la estrategia. Quizá echamos en falta algún indicador sobre el número total acumulado de contribuyentes para ver cómo vamos avanzando. Nos parecen positivas las propuestas para intentar promover compromisos multianuales, pero no debemos olvidar la posibilidad de contribuciones puntuales, porque, como sabemos, en cada país tenemos unas circunstancias y unos procesos presupuestarios distintos. Y acabo con quizá lo más importante. A pesar de estos puntos positivos que he señalado, consideramos que este documento requiere más trabajo y todavía no está listo, especialmente en lo que se refiere a los escenarios planteados. Apoyamos el texto alternativo de decisión que ha propuesto Canadá y otros que han trabajado, me consta que Noruega en ello también, para la creación de ese grupo de trabajo, que se revise la estrategia y se vuelva a presentar el documento en la siguiente reunión del Consejo. Principalmente creemos que los escenarios planteados deben ser realistas, con expectativas coherentes y acordes a las directrices de la COP. Esto debe estar fundamentado en contribuciones voluntarias, como se recogen en los fundamentos de este fondo. Y fundamental ampliar la base de donantes y la movilización de fondos no soberanos. Por eso creemos que todavía tenemos margen de mejora en este documento y sobre todo la premisa de que este fondo del marco global de biodiversidad debe ser un instrumento financiero innovador, ¿vale? Y tenemos que seguir trabajando en esas nuevas opciones. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Ramón. Bien recibido. We have next in line Jonas. I suggest that we give some minutes to Chis and Sumit after Jonas. And then we go back to the 5 remaining speakers so far. So with that said, Jonas from Norway, floor is yours. Jonas?
Thank you, Noemi.
Okay, yes, we see you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so our constituency would like to thank UNIT Secretariat for preparing this document and notes that it has many good elements. Like several colleagues, we're not ready to approve it at this time, as we have some reservations about the overall approach and the suggested financial scenarios. While we note that the proposed document aims to broaden the donor base and identify new approaches and innovative capitalization models, we do not think this is adequately reflected in the suggested scenarios, nor in the proposed actions. So we welcome the proposal as well to establish an ad hoc working group on predictability and financing, and like Canada and others, supported by others, we suggest broadening the mandate of the working group to specifically include recommendations to the Secretariat on how to revise document 04/05, and that this shall then be presented to the Council for consideration at our next meeting. So while we suggest the request made by Canada and supported by others to revise the decision text, on this agenda point we have one minor addition to the proposed decision text, which I will post in the chat. In addition to enhancing contributions, we think it's important to reflect the need to pursue additional approaches for mobilization of resources. So the change that the text that we'll post very shortly, hopefully it will come out in bold, our change, would reflect this and read as contributions to the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, along with additional approaches for mobilization of resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonas. Heard you loud and clear. Let's give some minutes to Chis and Sumit to respond, and then we will go. We will hear from our remaining 5 speakers: Andrea, Aliu, Ramson, Charlie on behalf of Ben Green, and Larissa. So with that said, Chis, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we're hearing good feedback as well as constructive suggestions on the way forward. I think it would be also get clarity on the collective revised decision, and because I think there might also be points in the chat that also came from France, and I think we need to have clarity as to what would be the decision, revised decisions to be adopted. And one question I have from my side, if I may, is that some of the comments touched on expanding the terms of reference to have more active role, if you will, in the actual development of and updating of the document in front of you, as well as the resource mobilization strategy writ large. So the question from my side is that, is the intention to come up with an updated decision, or is Council requesting us to revise the document in front of you for decision to be taken at this Council? So I think it would be good to have a little bit of clarity on that, because how we go about concluding this agenda item, I think, might have also some implications. Thank you. You want to add anything? Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Chis. Going back to our list of speakers and hoping to have some answers to Chis's question also as we move forward. I will now pass it over to Andrea, followed by Aliu. Andrea, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the Secretariat for the document. We really appreciated the opportunity to participate in the resource mobilization workshop, and we provided feedback to the Secretariat on that. We welcome the Secretariat's efforts to explore all options, but we realise that within those there are real trade-offs. We also welcome the section on the GBFF's value proposition in Annex A, which is very, very good. Like others, we have concerns that the funding scenarios in the draft strategy place an undue burden on sovereign donors. In this regard, we would be keen to continue deliberating this draft further with a view to discussing this at the next Council session, and we support Canada's proposal and Norway's addition in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Aliu, floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. IPLCs acknowledge the resource mobilization strategy for the GBF. IPAC notes the consultation process with observers, including indigenous people and local communities, and highlights that this process was well received and as it enables meaningful contributions in the overall strategy. IPAC broadly supports this approach very well. With regards to there's a section on key pillars on resource mobilization, under Pillar 3, private foundations and philanthropy. IPAC recommends the establishment of a specific window for direct access by indigenous people and local communities. Such a window, a specific window, will support indigenous people and local communities in their efforts to recognize their critical role in conserving biodiversity and achieving the global environmental benefits, and also the Conning-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and of course the GBF. IPAC also expresses appreciation for the baseline resource strategy, as it will enable the funds to continue its important work in partnership with indigenous people and of course local communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alio. Now over to Ramson, GEF observer on indigenous peoples and local communities, followed by Charlie. Ramson, floor is yours.
Thank you, Naomi, for giving me the floor. The International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity recommends the inclusive resource mobilization strategy for the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund to facilitate the implementation of the KMGBF consistent with the COP15 decisions and emphasizing resource mobilization from all sources. Furthermore, we underscore a resource mobilization strategy that aligns with the recommendations of the ad hoc committee on resource mobilization of the Convention on Biological Diversity, particularly acknowledging the non-monetary contributions of indigenous peoples and local communities at the local level. As previously recommended by speakers before me, IFB proposes a collaborative effort to establish accessible funding mechanisms, especially designing to channel resources directly to indigenous peoples and local communities, thereby supporting their crucial role as stewards of nature. We also encourage a collaborative approach to develop an allocation strategy that is readily accessible, transparent, and proactive, and ensuring that its effectiveness reaches indigenous peoples and local communities in a timely manner and is inclusive of all regions and ecosystems, while accounting for the diverse capacities of indigenous peoples and local communities across all regions. Lastly, we recommend an expanded engagement of indigenous peoples and local communities from all sociocultural regions for the GBFF to effectively address the challenges encountered by indigenous peoples and local communities in accessing biodiversity funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ramson. I'll now invite Charlie, who is joining us today on behalf of Ben Green, who couldn't join us in this meeting. So thank you, Charlie, and welcome. Floor is yours.
Many thanks, Naomi. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, Council. It's my first time addressing you, so thank you for letting me take the chair for this session. I feel like a lot of my comments have been made by speakers before me. I'll reiterate some of them, but I won't spend too long to take up any more time. Firstly, I would like to thank the Secretariat for pulling this document together. There is a lot of positives to be taken from this document. One thing that strikes me is that I think there may have been some confusion over whether this is the strategy or whether this is something leading up to a strategy. And I think maybe we didn't read the title of the document clearly. And I think that does affect how people view this and sort of the next steps, which I'll come on to in a moment. I think that the pillars that are outlined in the document are valuable, and it's really good to see some suggested actions, definitive actions outlined in the document, including sort of proactive outreach on communications and things like that, which I think takes this document a step further and is really positive. It's, as someone pointed out earlier, a resource mobilization strategy under the GEF is new. And so I think it is important to reflect what the CBD COP has asked of the GBF Fund and its council. In particular, we know that we were asked to consider or explore the potential for a scale of contributions. So we do need to reflect that in the decision. And I think that's an important part of what the terms of reference for the working group could do, is to look at opportunities and explore the potential for that. I would like to agree with comments made earlier by a number of colleagues, including Japan and from France, on the importance of emphasizing the non-sovereign sources of funding, not necessarily contributions. But I think that there is a good emphasis on that within the document. But I think there is a little bit of work that could be done, as others have said, on the two scenarios and how we consider the difference between sovereign and non-sovereign contributions. And on that note, I think the UK would also agree with France that we should not be comparing the capitalization of the GBF fund to Target 19A, because the GBF fund is a fund that should be applicable to all sources. It is more about the innovation of taking that forward rather than directly comparing the percentage of funding from sovereign donors that comes through the GBF fund that would apply to Target 19A. So I suggest we do remove that reference. I would also support the proposal from French colleagues to increase the input from those on the advisory group to the ad hoc working group. I think that is a very positive proposal. With the new members coming into the advisory group, I think this could add a lot of value to the work that the ad hoc working group could do, in particular emphasizing the non-sovereign nature and contributions. The proposal from Norway to add a little bit of language, which I think Jonas has put into the chat, we fully support that. And I think the conversation between Sumit and colleagues from Germany on various capital markets and other sources beyond contributions, direct contributions, I think that's that additional language in the text that Jonas has provided is really important and something that we would support. So I think in summary, it sounds like the council's not quite ready to adopt this decision as it's currently drafted. And so this is, in answer to your question, Chiz, it sounds like we're at a place where the proposal that Jonas has outlined there is to further develop, I think, is to welcome the strategy, but further develop it through amended terms of reference for the working group to think about this over the next 6 months before the sixth council. I think that's a fair summary of what I'm hearing from the different from different parties. It feels like there's a strong view that there's the positive elements of the strategy are very welcome, but we're not quite in a position to agree it with consensus today. Thank you very much for your time. I'll hand back over to you, Naomi.
Thank you very much, Charlie. And before handing it to Chiz to respond on your very good questions, I would suggest that we go through our last panelists, Larissa and Lucrecia, and then we will allow Chiz to guide us into the next step based on the very useful guidance received by Council. So, Larissa, à vous la parole. Larissa, si tu nous entends. Oui, voilà. Ah non, je te vois. Merci, Larissa. Ouais.
Merci beaucoup, Noémie. À mon tour, je voudrais féliciter en tout cas le travail qui a été abattu au niveau du secrétariat pour nous proposer justement ce projet de stratégie de financement, voilà, qui vise notamment à assurer une pérennité du GBFF. Voilà. Donc, merci beaucoup. Je voudrais soutenir aussi en tout cas la recommandation qui a été faite par le Canada et soutenue à plusieurs reprises par tous les autres intervenants, qui est celle justement de mettre en place un comité ad hoc, donc un groupe de travail spécifique pour pouvoir affiner justement la proposition qui a été faite par le secrétariat. Ce que je voudrais suggérer, c'est que ce travail d'approfondissement là se fasse en cohérence avec les stratégies nationales de financement de la biodiversité des différents pays membres du cadre de la COP sur la biodiversité, la COP 15, parce que je sais que chez nous, en Côte d'Ivoire, on a, depuis l'année dernière, finalisé justement la stratégie de financement de la biodiversité. Donc, j'imagine bien que c'est le cas dans les autres pays membres, en tout cas de la Convention sur la biodiversité. Donc, ce serait intéressant que la stratégie justement de financement de la biodiversité du FEM puisse en tenir compte. L'autre point de recommandation, c'est que justement, on puisse également intégrer le fait que en termes justement de contribution pour pouvoir financer les besoins de la protection et de la conservation de la biodiversité, on puisse également s'appuyer sur le secteur privé qui me semble être un gros potentiel, en tout cas en termes de financement. Pour vraiment aussi prendre en compte toutes les réalités, toutes les spécificités et adapter justement cette stratégie-là au contexte de chaque pays membre, je suggère que dans le groupe de travail, on puisse en tout cas inclure un représentant de la circonscription des pays côtiers. Voilà. Merci beaucoup, Noémie, et merci à tous.
Merci beaucoup à toi, Larissa, et à ta circonscription. I'll now give the floor to what it seems to be our final speaker so far, Lucrecia. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief and repeating much of what has been said. As others, of course, we'd like to thank the Secretariat for the resource mobilization strategy that contains many valuable elements and puts several viable options to be explored further on the table. However, as others, we believe that further work is needed, among others, to modify the scenarios that burden sovereign contributors unduly and might create unrealistic expectations. In that sense, we support the creation of the working group and the proposed new and modified decision text now by Norway. And accordingly, we also support the revision of the terms of reference to specify that the working group is also tasked with providing inputs for the revision of the document so it can be presented again at the next council meeting for adoption, hopefully. Finally, we also support the proposal by France to remove the cap currently at 2 of the number of members from the advisory group that are invited to join the ad hoc working group. As we'd like to see non-sovereign funding increase, we believe they would be particularly important in giving input to that work of the working group. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucrecia. And I don't see anyone else requesting the floor, but I do read some comments in the chat. Thank you very much. These are well received and will be certainly considered. So with that said, I will hand it back to Chi so she can guide us through. Thank you, and Chi's back to you.
Thank you very much, Noemi, and thank you so much for very constructive as well as forward-looking comments. So it seems to me that there is consensus that we will amend the decision for this particular agenda item, and I just want to confirm that the consensus is that the amended text as posted in the chat by Jonas Norway would be what would be the decision to be taken for this particular agenda item. So I hope my understanding is the view of the council members. And once again, I really appreciate very good inputs as well as recognition of the work that's been undertaken so far. So with that, back to you, Naomi.
Very many thanks, Chis. But as I don't see any more floor requests, I will hand it over to the co-chair.
Thank you, Naomi. Sorry, my screen, I lost 30 seconds of probably that critical time of Chiz saying what she did. So can I just confirm what you said, Chiz, in relation to, I think, the decision text?
Yes, certainly, co-chair. So we think there is consensus to go with an amended decision language as proposed by Norway in the chat, and I'm happy to read it if that would be helpful.
If you could, that would be great.
Okay. Yes. So the language as put in the chat by Norway it reads as follows: the Council, having considered the document GEF/GBFF.05/04 towards a resource mobilization strategy for the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund 2025 to 2030, decides to establish an ad hoc working group on predictability in financing and requests the working group to explore ways to enhance and strengthen predictability of contributions to the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, along with additional approaches for mobilization of resources, and present recommendations to the Secretariat on how to revise the document, which shall be presented to Council for consideration at its 6th meeting. Okay, so now I'm seeing that Jonas is proposing to also clarify the second part of the decision text proposed by Canada still stands. And let me read that. And that paragraph says the Council calls for new and additional contributions from all sources to support the continuous, rapid, and robust capitalization of the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund and asks the Secretariat to enhance efforts to mobilize resources. Over to you. So my intervention was that that there seems to be consensus that the amended language as proposed and as read out right now would be acceptable to council members. But over to you.
Thank you very much, Chiz, for reading that through. I think that's very clear. I'd now like to invite Council to adopt the amended draft decision text as just been communicated by Chiz and also included in the webinar chat. I don't see anyone taking the floor and objecting to that. So on that basis, we can consider the decision text approved. Thank you. Okay. So we're now very close to finishing time. So instead of pushing on to agenda item 3, we're going to give you all a very short early mark, and we'll start tomorrow with agenda item 3. And I'll now hand over to Naomi for some housekeeping announcements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, and I do agree that we're becoming more efficient with time as we move forward. Stéphane, you raised your hand. Yes.
Oui, pardon de revenir sur le sujet, mais on avait proposé d'élargir la composition du groupe de travail ad hoc s'agissant des membres de l'advisory group. On a entendu plusieurs collègues soutenir cette proposition et je voulais savoir si elle pouvait être retenue dans le texte final des termes de référence. On n'a pas proposé de texte, de langage, parce que c'est une modification très simple à faire, mais on aimerait simplement s'assurer qu'il n'y a pas d'objection parmi les collègues. Merci.
Thank you, Stéphane. So I will now hand it over to Chris to respond to that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I do think that that particular element, as well as there seems to be a general agreement on the potential expansion of the working group. Would it be acceptable to France to have that reflected in the highlights, and we will move along accordingly? Anyway, when we constitute the working group, I do think there are opportunities for the working group itself to really reaffirm the terms of reference. So would that be an option for France? Thank you.
Stéphane, maintenant, on retourne avec toi pour savoir si ça marche et puis on demande au conseil.
Oui, alors nous sommes prêts à être flexibles et pratiques. Simplement, si on ne modifie pas concrètement les termes de référence, le langage de l'highlight ne permettra pas de modifier les termes de référence tels qu'ils sont agréés. Et les termes de référence aujourd'hui limitent à 2 le nombre de membres de l'advisory group qui peuvent rejoindre le working group. Donc, si Chizuru me garantit que ça permettra d'avoir le même résultat, moi, ça me va très bien. Mais j'ai l'impression que juridiquement, ça ne suffit pas, l'highlight. Nous sommes entre vos mains.
Chis, would you have any reactions?
Okay, thank you so much, Stefan, for that comment. In that case, I believe we would need to amend the TOR as included in the document that was posted for discussion, and that would then need to come back as a revised document. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chis, for this very useful guidance. We will have to revise the document anyway because we have a new decision. So if that's agreeable, then today we will revise that document with the agreed decision. We will update the TORs as suggested by France, and we will reshare with Council today. If there are no more comments, then we will assume that it has been agreed upon. We will, of course, review all of these decisions before the joint summary of the co-chairs, so we ensure that all of the council views are well placed. So thank you very much, Stefan, Chis, co-chair. Would you like to come in, or should I just close?
No, I'm happy to say that we will therefore first agenda item tomorrow will conclude agenda item 4 based on the revised document that will be circulated immediately with the change to the terms of reference. But thank you very much, Chiz, and thank you, Stefan, for raising that issue. I'll now hand back to you, Naomi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. So with that said, we're still finishing a couple of minutes before. So just some housekeeping issues for tomorrow. So tomorrow, council members and alternates will have the executive session at 6 a.m. DC time. Links to join that session should already be in your emails. They were sent a couple of minutes ago. If they're not yet received, I will stay longer in this call, so you can let us know, and we can, of course, reshare if they're not yet in the inboxes. I also want to mention that this is a formal council agenda, so quorum is needed for the co-chair to start this meeting. So we invite council members and alternates to join in time at 6 a.m. and this is time tomorrow. We will then start at 7 a.m. with the rest of the council to go through agenda item 4, just to revise this document. And then we will, of course, continue with the progress report, results framework, other business, and then the joint summary of the co-chairs. Given all these updates, I will send later today an email with the updated timetable, so we'll have the same information of what's happening tomorrow. I will also share the revised GBFF document, agenda item 4. I will While it won't be the final one, as there are some decisions to be made tomorrow, we wanted to give Council more time to review the decisions made so far. And of course, tomorrow we will update and reshare with tomorrow's decisions. So with that said, thank you all again for joining us today, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you, and I will stay online if you have not yet received your link. Thank you.